or PHO or CO2 itself. So each extraction, I don't know, does it then justify its own name nomenclature? I think at a certain result, this discussion is bringing that division up so that we can have an understanding, because the consumer doesn't have an understanding as much as what they have access to or read or hear about. It's everywhere now. And I went down to the local bong shop there, and they've got full rigs and stuff going on. So how it spread was pretty quick, but the hash itself spread faster than the understanding of the process or a breakdown of what the concentrate is. What do you think about that, Sam? Do you think there should be individual name classifications per process?
I think in the near future, I will be releasing my new patented varieties, which have resin heads the size of grapes. So you just squeeze it, and people won't be doing extractions anymore. There won't be any need. They'll just be picking grapes off and having fun.
Can we make sure those grapes are seedless?
I just don't think...
God, I hope so. That'd be horrible.
I just don't think it's really a big deal that they're different. I just think that it's funny that the oil community wants oil to be hashish so desperately, and it's just from where the way I grew up, I just don't see it as being hashish.
They want to be included. I get why they want to be included. It's just they could separate themselves properly by actually saying, we are different and we're this, and then back what that is. But they're confused to a certain result, because
they should be happy with being stronger than almost all commercially produced and imported hashish. So the extracts can easily, beat them in the dust with both terpene and cannabinoid levels.
And that's why my medicine is predominantly that nowadays, because of that. It works for me. It doesn't work for everybody, but I still call it hash, because that's as close as people can understand it, Marcus. I'm not necessarily trying to say or undermine the discussion. It's just people, for the most part, less than 1% of us are aware of this, as it is. We're kind of at that tip of that spearhead again. And we could affect the change that ripples through if we take the discussion seriously, so that they can realize, I am a particular process that stands out, and so therefore we should this. But I understand why they're lumping themselves into hash, because that's as close to a denomination as they can get nomenclature-wise.
And I believe in the consumer knowing what it is, especially anything to do with health and safety. If there's any compromise whatsoever for any reason, then the consumer should be aware of it. But
well, here's what I'm having a discussion, Sam.
What?
Sam, we're having a discussion currently if it is a worthy discussion to gather the fertilizer grown of that particular flower listed along with the other information, such as potency.
Well, if you're an organic grower, it might be fairly important. If you're a chemical grower, then I'm not sure how important it is. If it's a chemical NPK, then that's what it is.
Well, some patients were asking, well, what was this originally grown with? And it started me to think that, well, this was an older consumer. I would say she was probably in her mid to late 50s. And she asked a very legitimate question. She said, well, what fertilizer was grown with this? And it, as I was behind the counter doing my own transaction on the side, I started to think about, that's a very valid point of notification, because it's not something that we've ever considered or had, much less the base of testing and technology. But is the consumer, as you're watching, are you the consumer? Are you concerned about the fertilizer that's grown, or you just care about the end product? Care how it's, what it's produced with versus what it, is that a valid listing?
There's a growing number of consumers that care how their cannabis or tomatoes and food in general is grown. That said, the vast majority of Americans don't seem to give a flying fuck. I mean, they eat GMO corn and they eat chemically fertilized corn, and that's the way the universe works.
Hey, it's the first time. It's the first time in the history of the world that poor people are obese. Check that out. That's a crazy.
Yeah, well, America believes in that food stamps and TV.
And high fructose corn syrup, apparently.
Well, that's what makes up the food stamps. That's what you can buy with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've always considered as well, like when I smoke hash and when I smoke oil, and I only smoke rosin, that's the only oil I smoke, but I can tell you that they're different. 150. Oh, that was loud.
Sorry.
That's okay. Welcome, dude. They are not the same, in my opinion, from even the highs that they give from the same material. Hitting an oil from something and even hitting different micron gland heads from the same cultivar can produce, you know, slightly different.
You can get a different high from the resin, from the BHO, from just the resin heads themselves.
I think that's why we make it differently, Etienne, and why people have preferences. So. And I think also one of the major problems I had with Addison's comment was that he's a founder in Steep Hill, a lab for cannabis. And I just felt like, shouldn't we use like the proper sort of like when we're speaking about these things, like you're a person that's going to be informing the majority of people. You're testing cannabis, you're testing hash.
Well, you know, we just need scientists and peer review. I mean, it's the same way that we're still having difficult with, you know, Rob Clark pointed out a few years ago now that indica and sativa are not what we thought they were. So now we have to change or spark this discussion, you know, that actually changes, you know, the definition of these concentrate nomenclatures, you know, because they are different, you know. And I love Addison. I worked with Addison originally way back in the day in dealing with testing. So, yeah. But at the same time, there's no different scientific classification or that has been presented to say otherwise. So I can see why he would say currently it is. But I understand what you're saying, and I think it's a valid discussion because concentrates are a whole other level of discussion than they were 10, 15 years ago. Not only that, thanks to you, by having your bubble bags and things like that, I have 8 to 10 varieties of bubble hash, as well as 8 to 10 varieties of rosin and etc. So I have the full spectrum, you know, and so it's left to the consumer to decide. However, you know, you're the scientists, you're the people who can break down information properly and disseminate it in white papers so that you can get peer review, so that you can then change the discussion, as opposed to, I mean, honestly,
eventually, Chen, the old lady that came in and asked about what the fertilizer was, that for buds or was that for an extract?
That was for buds, but I mean, it sparked the
eventually she's going to be doing it. She's going to be doing it for extracts too.
Right, and so that's why I was thinking, and I started discussion with my, you know, my purchasers is, you know, should we just, how would we gather this information? How does it make it to where it needs to go? As well as, you know, is it valid or worthy information to have? Is it just a waste of time currently, or is this another way that we can set trend by, you know, now posting the type of, you know, growth methodologies that goes along with it?
Yeah, one thing you can do is start collecting the information voluntarily from the growers and get feedback from the people who buy it and see, are there preferences towards particular fertilization regimes.
And that's a, you know, it's going to take time, but I've already started gathering that information so that we could learn, you know, because you know, it's part of our work. Good, and it's because when the consumers are now asking for it, and since I am, you know, a pioneering dispensary person, you know, I think of new ways to disseminate or gather information for the consumer, because it makes a difference for me when I go to a Whole Foods or any, you know, store. Do I buy conventional or organic? I tend to go organic, you know, if I have that option or I can afford that option. That's not always the case, but if I can, you know, I do think about that. And
I prefer organic as long as it tastes as good or better.
I prefer organic every single time, because to say it's not organic means that chemicals were sprayed on the earth,
Bingo.
affecting animals.
Expecting everyone, and then at the same time,
how are we getting away with something there? Just curious. Like, oh, we saved some money, so we're good, but nothing else is. So
no, I agree with you, but I unfortunately eat for taste. So if something tastes better, as long as it's not dangerous, then I would prefer it. But I agree. I agree with what you're saying, but I'm addicted to taste.
Well, you're in luck, because organic food 100 times, always tastes better. So you're pretty much good to go on that.
There's two different types of taste. There's the organic, delicious, sustaining life, and there's the toxic chemical Monsanto, which convinces your brain it's delicious while simultaneously poisoning your body and those around you. So this is what we have to deal with. This is the position we're in every decision we make. Every time we open our mouth, it's interesting to hear from the connoisseur perspective, like, and then have Forrest come in and you realize, no, you don't understand, like, these chemicals will absolutely affect these children, these sensitive beings.
I didn't mean chemicals as much as chemical fertilizers.
Sure.
Because in a lot of countries, they will use one particular of NPK because their soil is deficient in it, and without it, they get really super poor yields.
Which plant material and biomass can help a lot better than chemical fertilizers.
Hey, wait a minute. I've been a biodynamic farmer. I was taught by Alan Chadwick. I understand. You don't need to preach to me. I'm converted.
I don't feel like I'm preaching. I'm just talking. It's Hash Church.
It is Hash Church.
I do want to clarify is that I've had some wonderful organic fruit that tasted like shit before, so it doesn't make it everything absolutely taste good. I've had bad tasting stuff before too, but for the most part, I agree is that it does like if you do something proper, it brings out the flavonoids, it brings out the everything that you want, and I prefer somebody's homegrown something that's opposed to a mass produced.
I absolutely agree with you in general. It's true.
I wouldn't mind talking really quickly about how amendments and fertilizers do affect medicine, and for us to just look at it as a connoisseur, aspect makes it really difficult because there's a whole growing process that goes into it, and all of the nutrients and inputs that goes into it are really all part of the factor. So we get tons of people that want to know how medicine is grown, and it's really, really important to them. And when they find out that, wow, this medicine tastes really good, and it was grown in a way that was ecologically supporting nature and the environment, they're all over it. They don't want to have anything to do with chemicals, generally speaking, most of the time. And we're finding that to be a really important part of the selling point for farms, because they get to tell their story. They get to show how they're supporting bee populations. And in the end, I know a lot of farmers, we work with a ton of farmers, and they have maybe worked synthetically or in chemical regimens before and then turned over towards organics or towards even plant material or Korean natural farming methods. And they're getting higher cannabinoid counts and higher terpene levels through those methods. So I think that there's a lot of reasons why it's really important about what we put into the medicine. And if it can create a high-grade product in the end, it's a huge selling point because people really are behind it. So what do you guys think about that?
Well, I think that I wanted to welcome you to the room, welcome, and also welcome Wade into the room from House of Harlequin, and also welcome D420K into the room from the House of Nar, and fucking welcome Forrest into the room. I hope you're all doing well. I didn't miss anyone, did I? No, those were the newbies. D's been in the room for like an hour, and or a half an hour, and I just welcomed him now. So
hey, I couldn't interrupt you guys' conversation. That was pretty deep stuff, man. I couldn't even fit in a bong rip in there. I just did one.
That's it. We're just trying to get into the conversation. I love when Forrest and Wade come into the conversation because it really, and something that you said, Joshua, in regards to we have to take it beyond the connoisseur sort of level, and I totally get that. Yet at the same time, it really has been some of the most OCD connoisseurs who have maintained and stewarded this plant, this medicine, to a point where the people who are like, oh, this is the most special thing right here. It's like, it's for my head. It's for, you know, we've been sharing it for 20. It seems that there's a really interesting transition from those, the same way that particular plant makes someone feel incredible through their recreational feelings or adult use, that it translates over to some very powerful medicine versus, you know, buying some Mexi swag off the street or whatnot. So,
as Sam knows, the biodynamic aspects do bring out amazing qualities in cannabis and food, and that's why it's still around.
Listen, how many years have you been growing cannabis biodynamically?
Since I have been up here for 19 years. I mean, you know, biodynamics. How about this? You know,
I've been doing it twice as long, so I'm in the boat. I believe in it, and it's the way I personally do it. But I also know that most farms are not biodynamic, or be they for vegetables, fruits, or cannabis. And I think it would be better if more were. But yeah, it's hard to convince some people.
Well, the proof is in the puffing. Whatever you were doing back in the day, Sam, when I first met you, whatever you were growing, I can honestly say to this day,
that was grown biodynamically, organically.
No one's ever put anything in, like, that is really seriously medicine. That is like medicine that frightened my soul. Like, I've never been high like that in my life. Like, that is that you could probably eat enough of that and operate on a person. Like, you would knock them unconscious for 36 hours if you ate. How did you ever get knocked out by eating that resin, Sam? As in,
well, what happened to me a few times when I made no-bake cookies, I would make them with a half a gram or a gram of THC. So each one would have 1 gram or even 2 grams of the dry sift. That was 50% THC by weight. So,
and did you have an emulsifier in those cookies to break it down?
Yeah, they were putting ghee, and also to activate them, they were double boiled in ghee.
Oh Lord!
Right.
So clarified butter, and then powdered sugar and powdered cocoa.
That sounds like a trip ticket to another dimension.
Well, the 1 gram was quite strong. And
I'm telling you, dude.
Yeah, a few people who ate a few of those. Also, when you took a bite out of them, it was like the strongest bitiness, peppery taste from the resin that you've ever tasted. I mean, they were really, really rich in terpenes, because it's not THC that has that bitter bite. It's the terpenes.
Isn't it strange that this plant gets made illegal so long ago? It's got these incredible properties, but it seems that people who want to get high are the people who are the stewards for all of these years while they're trying to eradicate it and get rid of it. And it's just this really, I keep going back to that transition of, you know, the hashish eaters getting their teeth wrenched out in the 14th century in the Cairo Square, like, compared to now where it's just opening up, and it's just so much bigger than adult use now, as we're all seeing and learning over the, who would have ever thought 20 years ago that, you know, cannabis would be getting credit for all of the things that it's now being credited for. It's pretty spectacular. I wanted to ask,
I think I honestly did believe in all of these medical applications, even ones that we hadn't heard of yet. I expected them to be found with each different cannabinoid, with each different terpene combination. You know, it's going to modify it for other medical indications. So well, I expected it.
I was more of the school of, like, I thought it was burning out my brain cells when I was like 14, 15, puffing joints. I just figured that's what it was doing. And as I, you know, learned, as I met people like Hillary Black and yourself and many others, I realized that, wow, this is unbelievable just how actually helpful it is to people.
It's true that in the 1800s and a lot of the apothecaries and in the Victorian era, cannabis was a base of tons of medicine. So it's almost like we had to teach ourselves that it wasn't good. And they had to force it down our throats that it kills brain cells and monkey brain cells and all that for us to totally forget about it en masse so that we could totally rediscover it and find out, wow, it's amazing. It's a medicine. And it is an incredible awakening. And with all the labs, even though some of the labs are talking controversial stuff, you know, they have helped us get to a lot of really good information. And it's really exciting.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Without the labs, nobody would have CBD varieties.
There you go. And everybody loves their CBD varieties. Big deal.
Well, almost everybody.
So, Forrest, we were having a discussion right before you came on regarding a question. I don't know if you heard us in our discussion prior. I had a patient come in, and she was wondering what fertilizers were used on the product and how they were grown. And so we've started the discussion to the point where we're actually gathering or doing our best to gather from the farmers as they come in is what what they actually grew it with. And just having the discussion, do you think it's beneficial? And of course, I know with you, it's probably a no-brainer, but I'd like to hear from you.
Well, I mean, I think it's absolutely beneficial. I mean, knowledge is power, right? And if we're doing things there's a lot of fertilizers that can be relatively harmless, but whatever you put into the ground is going to be in the plant. I mean, that's what's amazing about cannabis, and that's what you have to be responsible about it as well. It's a bioaccumulator. It's going to take what's in that soil and make it part of itself. So a lot of times it's just, a lot of folks want it to be kind of black and white, good and bad, right and wrong, evil. There are fertilizers that can be really beneficial and healthy for the plant, that the plant needs for a healthy soil. There's but a lot of that fertilizer doesn't necessarily mean medical or like miracle grow, right? Or some sort of man-made compound even. You know, building living soil can be done without a lot of toxic things. So I think a survey for growers coming in, especially as an establishment that is, working with patients, is a great practice to say, here's what it is. And then how is the medicine made? If you're using certain fertilizers, you have certain practices. There's a big difference on if you're making a medicine from the flower or just selling flowers or making extract from flowers versus if you're making that extract through roots and stalks and stems and calling it whole plant. So your risk goes up higher there because that's where the plant stores a lot of compounds that could potentially be risky, as we learn more about, and we've talked about this here before, but we learn more about certain metals or toxins that can be stored in the plant. So, right now it's hard to be black and white as far as what's good, what's stored where, how is it transferred, with the exception of, systemic pesticides that we see coming in even second and third generations with plants. But the reality is, I think if you as a business owner are being responsible enough to say, well, here's the information, at least giving the consumer the ability to look at it and make a decision for themselves, then that's as much as we can do at this point, because we are still learning about how much is transferred where and how it affects the people. So when we're working with children who are as young as 6 months old, we have a zero tolerance policy because certain pesticides and compounds we know are toxic. And then others, well, the science is still out. We're looking at it, so we play on the safe side either way, But I think with a lot of medicine right now, a lot of people just don't understand that what is missing is just the information there for the consumer to make the decision that is best for them, not necessarily having to have everything on some sort of standard that is, the standard that I would expect with children, because not everyone needs. If I were going to get a product, and this is where I think the future of cannabis, especially when it comes to pricing and economics, is a grading type of scale. I don't need as a full-grown adult, and I'm not treating health conditions. If I wanted to go get some flowers, what would be safe for me is a completely different grading scale than what would be safe for maybe some other people with immunocompromised systems and things like that. So, you know, I'm on the side of just the information should be there so that people who know what they're using it for can get medicine that is appropriate for them.
Right. I have a question for you.
I absolutely agree with you, and I'll be happy to grow it for you outdoors where the birds might poop on it a little tiny bit.
I have a question for you, Forrest. Have you noticed any differences? I'm sure a lot of parents notice the differences in the cannabinoid and terpene profiles and how those can change and help and maybe not help. But have you ever noticed differences in how the medicine was extracted, whether it was an oil, whether it was made with mechanical screen separations? Do you notice differences in those?
Yeah, absolutely. This is why, you know, and I'll tell everyone here, we at the Collagenous Network, we're doing ethanol extraction, organic ethanol extraction, which a lot of people might shake like, oh, that's not the best way to do it. And well, for one, we're fortunate to have a lot of lab testing, so we make sure we have no solvents and things like that. But the reason we settled on that as opposed to like even CO2 right now is because of an efficacy difference that we've seen. And, you know, without going into that, ethanol extraction isn't just one thing. A lot of people hear that and they say, well, I do that too. But, you know, I like to use the example of we can give everybody, you can give me the ingredients for a beef Wellington, and you can give Gordon Ramsay the ingredients for a beef Wellington. And just because we have the same thing and the same equipment doesn't mean we're going to get the same product at the end. So
know-how.
We spent years, you know, really trying to refine our method so that we can get a really whole plant representation of the oils and the flavonoids and terpenoids in it that I feel like I've missed, and we didn't see the same efficacy with some of those other processes that are really good at stripping out a lot of the plant. You know, you get these beautiful golden transparent ambers, but when we went to use some of the medicines, we just didn't see some of the efficacy, and we just made the determination that, well, with our limited resources and our need for whatever was missing out of these two, we settled on this other extraction method specifically because although we saw a more pure and pretty looking product with some of the CO2, you know, closed loop systems, the efficacy wasn't anywhere near as good. And so my logic would tell me that something was taken out during that process that was having medical benefit.
And Forrest, for your information, if you use an ultrasonic shaker with an ethanol bath and you put whatever you want extracted in that for about 30 seconds while you're shaking it, the oil will come out light yellow. You only get about 80% yield. You lose about 20%, but you can then extract that with ethanol in the way you've been doing it. But then you'll get oil that is so pretty that you won't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, we have oil that is, and I could run and grab some, though it probably wouldn't look, you wouldn't be able to tell over the webcam, but it's beautiful amber. It's not, you know, it's not that sludgy chlorophyll filled sort of crock pot.
The longer you soak it and the higher the temperature of the ethanol, the darker and greener it gets.
Right. So we do very short soaks and those sort of things. But anyway, yeah. So it's a long answer to a short question, but all that led through seeing differences in efficacy that I think have to do with what is and isn't filtered out of the plant. And
how are you administering the extract? Is this in a sublingual tincture?
Yeah, for the most part, for the most part, it's considered internal because sublingual, you know, it'd be holding under the tongue, and a lot of kids aren't cooperative. So even though internal dosing is probably the least efficient, and, you know, the liver removes a lot of it before it even becomes really effective in the system, with kids and people who have developmental delays, you know, you don't always have the most understanding or cooperative patient. So we get it in them however we can. But yeah, sublingual and internally, 99.
What is the extract analyzed for in terms of cannabinoid content?
Say that again, it broke up.
What is the extract analyzed for in terms of cannabinoid content?
Well, I mean, we do a full cannabinoid profile, and then pesticides, microbiome, residual solvent, you know, those sort of things.
So is it like 60% or 70% cannabinoids, or?
I would say on average between, ours come out between like 65 and 75, yeah, in that window.
The reason I was asking about the different types of medicine, my friend Cheryl Rose, her daughter Haley, who's local here in BC, also has LGS. I guess got diagnosed when she was quite young, like 7 or 8 years old. And they found this Haley's Comet, this high CBD cultivar that worked for her. They named it after her, Haley's Comet. And she was getting quite relief from this. And it was just something interesting. I've never really talked about it much. You know, I didn't want to sound like I was trying to promote my company, but I had given her bags so that she could make different medicines for Haley. And I guess in the end, she started giving her this bubble in capsules instead of the oil she was making. And it was the first time Haley had ever gone, I think it was 100 or 200 days without a seizure. Wow. It was the longest time. Yeah. Because, you know, the oil and stuff cut her seizures down by like 90% or something, but it didn't completely eliminate them. It was only until she started making bubble hash and putting all the different micron hashes inside the capsules that she got this incredible, you know, like, I'm pretty sure it was over 100 days, which I don't think Haley had ever gone 100 days in her entire life since she was diagnosed.
What's the cannabinoid profile or ratio of that strain?
Let me look it up real quick for you.
It's been amazing. I only asked because I used to hesitate saying things like this, but, you know, like everybody else, the more families you work with, the more confident you get seeing patterns. And it's amazing to me how many more kids respond to a 2-to-1, between 1 to 2 and 2 to 1 in that range ratio medicine, more so than the 20 to 1 high CBD.
This one's a 1-to-1.
Yeah.
This one's
ding,
a
ding, ding. Yeah. So especially with LGS, and when I talk to parents, because a lot of people come or people who are treating, we just, CNN really helped boost this. And a lot of that was not that they did anything, they brought a lot of good attention to the subject, but some of the negatives that came along with that was the CBD felt good and safe to talk about for ideological reasons, and not necessarily because that was what they had discovered was the best medicine for these conditions. You know, it just felt safe to say, well, this one doesn't get you high, so we're going to max out this and give it. And CBD has some benefits in that way, but the benefits are really, when you start adding THC to it, the benefits are more than double than when they're isolated, THC or CBD. And we've seen that with a lot of kids. They'll have some reduction with Charlotte's Web or, you know, some of those high CBD, ACDC or high CBD strains. But when you start to get closer to a more balanced profile, you start to see some of those dramatic results. And that's what I experienced that with my own son, you know, with he never had a single day without a seizure on high CBD meds, but that's what we started with because that's what we had heard, you know, 6 years ago as parents, and almost gave up because we thought, well, I guess the CBD, you know, it's what they say is good for kids, but it's not working for us, so we're not lucky. And, you know, through doing research and working with
are you using your alcohol extract to make distillate, or are you using the alcohol extract in the capsule or in the formulation itself?
I'm trying to see if I have any here. I can run and grab it. No, it's like full extract FICO, what we call it, full extract cannabis oil. It is.
You're not winterizing and distilling or anything like that.
No, it's just thick, you know. So we measure that, we test that, we measure it out, and then yeah, there's some. Wade's got some. That's made by our group right there.
Is it terpene? Is it still terpene rich?
Oh yeah, you open the lid on that thing, and it smells like a fruit basket. It's got these beautiful.
Well, then the terpenes, besides the THC, might also be contributing to the additional for the CBD. Yeah,
no, that's it. And I am sold. You know, I know there's still some debate in the scientific community about the entourage effect, but there's no debate in my experience, because we've just seen it too many times where we've recreated the exact same base cannabinoid profile, right? Your CBD, your THC, your CBG as much as you can, and how that translates, or you know, you guys understand, etc. We've had strain shifts and been forced because we've run out, but we've, with lab testing, been able to recreate those profiles and seen absolutely night and day ends of the spectrum as far as efficacy with kids, where at times you could actually even see adverse effects, where when we went back to the strain that was originally there, same cannabinoid profile, you then see the same positive benefits come back.
And the reason I was mentioning this was because a lot of these 20-to-1 CBD to THC ratios varieties have quite consistently different terpene flavors and aromas than varieties that are higher in THC and have been selected for terpenes.
Yeah, if I've noticed that as well. I mean, you see, you know, I know that a lot of the R4s and Charlotte's Web lineage have a lot of liming, pining sort of smells to them when they're growing that we don't see with some other strains. Not as much as the caryophyllene black pepper sort of funk that you get with other balanced ratios. But like I said, it's I think the answer is in a combination of both.
And the answer also is whatever helps the patient.
Yeah, and that's it. You know, that's exactly it. For you know, so saying that, okay, we've seen better results with a more balanced cannabinoid ratio. But I can give you an example of 10 kids where that's not the case. You know, some kids or people, you know, I work with kids and adults, but mostly kids respond poorly to THC, and you know, you get the same diagnosis and they need exact opposite medicines. And the way I try to help people visualize this is just understanding the concept that when you see you know, so we'll just stick on this theme because that's Forrest's theme, but it's a good one to visualize. If you just stick with a seizure, when you see a seizure happening, you're seeing the consequence of something broken in the system, right? So you might have two people with seizures, and the doctor observes those symptoms, and you're going to get a similar diagnosis. Let's say Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Bam, you get that diagnosis. That diagnosis doesn't correlate with what might have broken down in the system to manifest those consequences, those seizures. And different parts of, just to oversimplify it a bit, let's just stick with the endocannabinoid system. Different parts of that system can go wrong and manifest the same problem. We could not be producing, as you guys know, anandamide 2-AG. You could have a downregulation issue with the CB1 receptor. You could not have the enzyme that is necessary to break down and cause the reaction when anandamide or THC bond to the CB1 receptor. So there's just three different real quick examples of things, three different things that could be going wrong in the system that are going to manifest the same seizure when the endocannabinoid system's not able to regulate neurotransmitter function. So we know these different cannabinoids profiles and terpene profiles interact with these receptors differently and cause different reactions. Some cause anandamide to build up in the system, some interact with the receptors in different ways. And I think this is really the key, and logic would tell me that this is really why we see some people with the same symptoms but need different approaches, because although we can see the symptom, we can't see what's going wrong in the body. So teaching people how to take an efficient approach to seeing what works for them is really the trick, you know. And that goes back to, you know, dispensaries and what do they tell patients when they come in looking for things. You know, some of it is feeling comfortable telling patients, well, it could be a lot of different things that you need. How can we teach you how to most efficiently find what your body needs? As opposed to tell them, no, you need this, and if this doesn't work, then you're out of luck, right? And it gives them the wrong impression of what might help them, and they could walk away prematurely when there's still an answer there for them somewhere.
What fish song comes to mind? You can heal the symptoms, but not affect the cause.
Oh, man.
Right?
I was on a big fish rant last night. Don't get me started.
Yeah. Well, hey, I was just going to ask one more thing about concentration. So you talked about that, you know, extract being somewhere between 65 to 70% cannabinoids. So then you take that and you cut that with like another oil vehicle, like coconut oil or something like that. What's your ratio when you make the oil that actually is going in? So that helps us understand, again, the level of cannabinoids that you're getting in these doses, and whether or not the efficacy is always going to be a function of how much they're getting. So how is it, like a 10-to-1 dilution of that?
Well, that's
extract?
All right. So
oh, he got muted.
Sorry, Forrest, I muted you. I thought you were talking to someone else. You got to unmute yourself.
No, I was just reaching behind me in my bag of tricks here. So that's the benefit of having different. I look at it, the more I've worked with this, the less I look at strain names and I look at the test results and say, okay, we have a palette of cannabinoids, terpenoids, flavonoids that we can work with. And from there, you know, Mark, we're able to really dial in what that individual person needs. So when you have your extract, right? So this is some nice pineapple jack THC extract, labeled and tested, ready to go, measured out. We know exactly, well, exactly within testing range. We all know that analytical testing varies a little bit. So we're able to take that and I can say, okay, well, I have the amount of THC and a particular terpene profile with that. But maybe this person is showing that they are also responding to acidic compounds. So I can take some rosin that we've had pressed here that is also acidic, right? I don't know if you can see that. Oh, it's bubbly goodness there. And work with then adding in specific THCA and CBDA and THCVA and some of these other compounds, and basically then build a customized medicine for that person. And when we get into, you know, I work really with rare, you know, neurological conditions a lot. So it ends up being very individualized. So you're able to take that medicine. And yeah, I use typically MCT oil unless they have a sensitivity to it. Not uncommon. Most people are doing that these days.
That's a good choice. And there's actually studies that show it's a preferred vehicle for getting quick onset of activity in the oral mucosa. So yeah, that's a real good choice.
Right.
So what's your ratio that you use? We're like, if people are listening and they want to, again, create their own products, I mean, how would you, I always thought that the best way to do is to like dose until you actually feel cannabinoids in the patient. So when you know that you can titrate them up to the level where you're agonizing CB1, maybe you want to dial back from that. So would you start a patient, especially a child patient, at say like a 20 milligram per day dose, or is 10 milligrams or 5 milligrams? What's the right place to start to sort of look to titrate up to that level of where you know you're getting cannabinoids in there, but you're not doing it in a way that completely incapacitates the child or the patient to where they have to, you know, get dizzy, or it just, other patients, what I find is that they don't want to take the medicine anymore because they don't like the way it feels. And so I think it's really important to titrate their body up to that level, because that tells you that you're getting cannabinoids into their system, but maybe dial back the daily dose so they can still be functional and not be dizzy and not feel disoriented. So what advice would you give, especially parents looking for that?
Didn't Dr. Meshulam in Israel find that really young children, like, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5, don't get high when they're given THC?
Yeah, I've seen children take doses that have blown my mind. I'm going to meet with this parent because I want to really double check and make sure they're looking at the test accurately. But I have a little girl who is 70, maybe, no, she's like 45 pounds. She's 8 years old and is somewhere around 1,800 milligrams a day dosing. So that would be an extreme.
Well, nobody starts at that level.
Okay,
right?
so when we're talking about starting, though, I started 1. You know, we started 0. You know, it would be 1 dose.
Slow.
We check for all sorts of things.
No, I agree.
Low and slow.
I think that that's the only way you can use the physiological response as any indicator to whether or not they're feeling, again, I guess, again, my feeling is I was trying to work with an older patient who feels very disoriented when she takes like a 100 milligram candy. So what we're trying to do is start with her low and slow, I think is the way to go. And I think especially for children patients, wouldn't you recommend the same?
Well, this is why we use drops. You know, it's not just for, you know, looks or because people are used to getting it in droppers. One of the main advantages is that you can control the dose relatively, you know, approximately down to the milligram. So we start with like a milligram or a drop, depending on how concentrated the droppers are. And that's another great reason when you're going from concentrate, you can make that tincture as concentrated or as diluted as you think is appropriate. But yeah, I lean on the side of you start down at minimum, but you don't also need to dilly-dally with titration for months on end, right? So we start with a dose. We make sure there's no adverse reactions, no rare allergies, nothing that could be throw us a curveball. And then we just start to titrate up with times of day. So we keep the dose still very small, might be a milligram. And then we add in the bedtime dose and then the noon dose because we want to see every 4 to 6 hours because our goal is to keep a sustained level in the system, not spikes and waves, right? Especially when you're dealing with neurological type conditions. So that's sort of our approach. And then when we get the 4 or 3 doses, whatever they feel is appropriate a day, then we start titrating up those doses, like a milligram or 2 at a time. And doing it that way, I can't actually remember the last time I had someone even complain about being high because you will see efficacy usually before that happens for most endocannabinoid regulatory issues, which a lot of these conditions fall under. And once you do start to feel something, because you're taking such a methodical, slow approach, that is not big jumps in your dose, it's never at the point where this is uncomfortable. It's kind of like, yeah, okay, I maybe feel a little relaxed. You're on such the low threshold of intoxication or psychoactivity that it's never a negative. It's never been a negative experience. And you're 100% right about children and how they process it because like I said, and then I've heard Dr. Russo and other doctors say this as well, who've noticed it, kids just process it differently. So if we take that low and slow approach, like you said, or low and not too slow, but methodical approach, you know, I don't see a real problem with intoxication ever. And the kids who do end up they titrate up the doses that I know would knock me on my butt. And they've never seen even, you know, a blurred eye or giggly attitude out of them. There's no sign of any sort of intoxication whatsoever. And I think, you know, each individual endocannabinoid system has something to do with that. If they're already deficient and the receptors aren't being saturated or by an anandamide 2-AG, I think you're going to be able to tolerate more stimulation through THC. So all those things have something to do with it. But that's my approach.
The other thing that those heroic doses do is you got to remember that the metabolites are stored in fatty tissues and fatty organs, and so it's protecting those organs from free radical damage and oxidative damage, but it also, on the burning of adipose tissue, basically releases all that, you know, systemically. So I mean, humans were evolved to hold on to these cannabinoids for as long as we possibly can, and they're fat soluble. So like most antioxidants, like vitamin C, are water soluble. The cannabinoids are fat soluble, which protects fatty tissues from oxidative damage. Oh my God, did I say that? I already said that. I feel like I'm on a
no,
Mark, myself now.
I've seen changes as they go off of certain medications. There's medications that cause you to gain weight, right? We've all seen that or experienced that. And I've seen big time, not just the removal of the medication influence significantly the cannabinoid supplement dose, but as they lose that fat, you know, right? So the adipose tissue is no longer making those stores. I've seen the interactions with the cannabinoid medicines change and have to really make some adjustments because of that as well. So that is a really good point.
Well, and the other thing that's different about your product, which I'm very intrigued in, is that in this full plant extract, you're not winterizing, so you're not removing any of the other components, such that, so if your stuff is analyzing for, let's say, neighborhood of, 70%, there's 30% other components in there. If terpenes are a sizable fraction, well, there's still a pretty sizable fraction of other extractables that are coming along with the plant that certainly you may not want in, say, like a dabbable concentrate or a dabbable product, because those things are going to goes and degrade. But certainly in this product format where you're looking to try to deliver the whole plant goodness by extracting everything that the plant has to extract. Again, there's fatty acids in there, there's lipids in there, like you point out, there's flavonoids in there. All the other minor components that are non-cannabinoids might be helping the overall entourage effect of everything. And that's good for people to hear, that, again, you don't necessarily have to go through making distillate. Now, making distillate, I think, is a completely valid opportunity, again, to make medicine from the plant. But I think in this particular case, what you're looking for is, again, it could possibly provide. So, for those,
including the roots.
Including the roots. For those who used to watch Star Trek, this is like fire all weapons, phasers, photon torpedoes. You hit them with everything, because if the plant offers this, and again, the plant is a source of vital nutrition for humans, why not take it in the extract? Why would you want to separate it out from something that, again, can provide medical efficacy? And I think that's part of what you're seeing in the boost of efficacy.
Yeah, we go back and forth on certain parts of the plant and how to best use it, what chlorophyll's impact is, and those sort of things. But, I agree. There's a lot to the plant. When I don't have data to back it up that isn't anecdotal. This is where we get into anecdotal data. But, when I have a tincture, and I'd be happy to send you guys some to check out, that you open the lid and it just bursts in the room with all the things that the plant wants to communicate. And that's what those terpenes are. It's its way of communicating with the world around it. With the evidence that's come out with some of the entourage studies that are being done, and across the board, the studies have shown that single isolate cannabinoid therapies are not as effective as therapies that are, when you include and reintroduce, THC to a CBD therapy, or vice versa, and then you start to talk about the terpenes. That research is being done, and it's pretty conclusive. It's each study has shown the efficacy is increased with the addition of the whole plant cannabinoids and terpenoids, as opposed to isolating. To me, it's just, that's the direction we're going to go until we have something that points us otherwise. And yeah, there are some terpenoids that are only in the roots. Dr. Russo's work right now is just mind-blowing, but I take it with a little bit of caution. And this is where we get back to where we started, where it's just, I don't want to say what's right and wrong, because who am I? We're all on this journey of researching and doing what we think is best. So I think that there's some caution personally with the kids we were working with, if we were starting to integrate and distill and concentrate medicines that were made from roots and stems and things like that, just strictly because of cannabis's ability to suck things out of the soil and store it in its roots and stems. But that doesn't mean there's not medically beneficial things in there. That doesn't mean that if your soil's good and your soil's clean and your environment's clean, that can't be done safely. So this gets back to just making sure that the customer knows what they're buying, so that they can say, yeah, this could be great for me as a full-grown adult. If I'm trying to work with my, 6-month-old with neuroblastoma, I might avoid some of these just because there might be something I feel is something to be cautious about.
No stems, no seeds that you don't need. Acapulco Gold is far out weed.
Well, that's what makes me nervous about this bulk CBD coming in. There's people now, like, you can get gallon CBD oils, and it's all just, it's essentially it's industrial waste. It's from Asia and Eastern Europe, where they're doing big hemp you know, for manufacturing reasons. They're making hemp products, ropes and clothes or whatever, wallets, etc. But they just bundle all this stuff into a big hopper at the end of it and just dose it with things, and you get CBD at the end, and they're able to distill that down and run it through a purifier, and, you know, sell you these gallons of purified CBD oil. And that to me, without having that information of, you know, where it comes from, how it's made, what's in it, is it organic, that stuff just makes me nervous. And that could just be being overcautious, but it's not for me.
It should make you nervous.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think people realize that's what that is, that it's a waste product of the hemp industry in Asia. It's not even grown for that purpose.
I try to explain it to people.
In China, it's all grown biodynamically, for sure, with human poop.
Oh, my God. Well,
and
there's definitely a need for monomolecular, for the isolation of the molecules, because then people like Forrest can come along and find the recipes and add the terpenes and produce those very specifically accurate cannabinoid and terpene profiles that stay accurate every single time, all the way down the line, whereas plants with variables, they can have these little bits of changes and whatnot. So I see the value. I also see the snake oil salesman aspect. For a long time, I couldn't figure out how is everyone shipping this stuff when it's not legal to ship. And then I realized, oh, okay, they're shipping hemp oil that's been cold pressed. And because it's a low THC, you know, there could be CBD cultivar in the cultivar, that it basically, small amounts of it press into the oil, and they're calling that CBD oil, when really it's hemp oil with CBD contaminant in like super small amounts.
I ran a bottle. It's $189 for a bottle of, marketed to kids and families, everyday plus hemp oil. And we took it to the labs and tested it, and there was nothing in it. Not a terpene, not a fraction. The machines couldn't even pick up CBD, you know, and so it's essentially, you know, it's $189 of, you know, I'm assuming hemp seed oil, could be olive oil for all I know, you know, just nothing in it beneficial.
Wow.
I didn't hear that, Mark said.
I was probably soybean oil just because it's the cheapest.
Yeah, so that is absolutely happening.
No.
So are you decarboxylating this ethanol extract, or you're putting it in there not decarboxylated? You are
decarboxylate, but because of the distiller, it's really good at temperature control, but it mostly decarbs as well. It's not really good with making acidic compounds, which is where we've started renting out a rosin, you know, press and starting to do it that way. But yeah, we're decarbing. We do classes for families up here. We're doing another one here pretty soon if you're in the Northern California area, where we actually teach families how to do this and just try to give them some independence, you know. But yeah, it's decarbed. It can all be done at home. I'm a big advocate of not letting people convince people that they can't take control of their medicine and do it safely. It's not easy, and it's not right for everybody, especially if they're full-time caregivers, to be able to do that. But that's different from it being impossible to do. So we do a lot of classes teaching families, you know, how to do it if they wanted to, or at least watching them be able to know exactly how the things that we're providing are made, and how it's done safely, how to read test results, how to then use that to make accurately dose medicines, etc. You know.
Yeah, I think that that's really important to empower families how to do it themselves. Sorry for interrupting you there. But I have a question for you guys, and I'm wondering about, are you working or doing any test studies in utero with pregnant women that, because we're learning about this as a basic nutrient. And I've also noticed that in children that we're also treating with the oils that we're making, which is a whole plant extract as well, we're noticing that the children who have had THC or CBD from the beginning, you know, mothers that have ingested cannabis from the beginning have different kind of tolerances than children who, you know, have never had it before. It's actually quite significant. So talking about like a basic nutrient from the beginning, you know, in a zygote form, I think that's just a really interesting conversation. And I'm wondering, do you work with women in pregnancy?
You know, it's funny that you bring that up. I mean, it's known that endocannabinoid signaling is a huge part of neurological development, pre and postnatal. I mean, but it's funny, I'm going to jump to another story real quick because I do a lot of consultations with families from all over the world, Indonesia, the UK, India, you know, the United States, of course, Canada. And I had a mom who I was speaking with this week who has a very young child, I think 7 months old, and infantile spasms, right? So this is not a good sign when your child starts having infantile spasms at that age. It can quickly be diagnosed as West syndrome, which then leads into these more unfortunate epilepsies. But she was in Texas, and the access in Texas is horrific. Inhumane would be the word I would use. But they do have access to what they can order online, which is, although not necessarily legal, but the lack of enforcement allows us to get some CBD, real CBD products at times. And she was using those CBD products and not having any luck with her daughter's seizures. She was still having these spasms every single day. And a friend of hers gave her THC. And like a lot of parents, like, I don't know if THC is safe. You know, I'm not sure if I should use it. And she read she was going to see if it was safe, or I don't know what she was thinking as far as seeing if it was safe, but she was going to try it herself and see if it was, you know, poison or not okay. She read the label wrong and just totally dosed herself, like with a 40 or 50 milligram dose, which is not something she does because she's not a cannabis user. Was knocked out on the couch for the day. And she's like, man, it was an experience. And it kind of made her think, oh, now I'm nervous to give this to my baby. It was such an intense experience. But then she called and said that she's breastfeeding her child. And after she dosed herself with that THC, her daughter went 4 days without a seizure. And she hadn't gone 4 days without a seizure in months and months and months. And
this is something that really excites me. I think that it's incredibly important. We definitely work with small children, and especially work with small children and women and children with all different types of autoimmune disorders, whether it's seizures, whether it's emotional disorders. And we're noticing that, you know, really dosing the mothers with large doses of THC along with the CBD is immediate response, you know, with the baby and breastfeeding. And I think that, you know, it's an important conversation to have even, you know, with our alternative culture, because they're going to be more receptive to it. But I do think that it's important to be introducing to mothers, you know, from the beginning of pregnancy or even before they want to get pregnant, to start ingesting cannabis in doses, you know, that make them feel good, which in turn is going to help their baby in the long run. And then I think when we see these children who have had cannabinoids since the beginning, you know, they are able to receive the cannabinoids much easier. It's something that's very familiar to their system.
Which allows their immune system to, you know, avoid autoimmune disorders.
Yeah. And it's an important key that, you know, we haven't had enough research out there, but we are doing it, like you said, you know, working with a lot of children. And I definitely am noticing that those children that have had the THC and the CBD from the very beginning are just doing so much better with the medicine right off the get-go. It's not a week, it's the first dosage that they get it because their body is reminded of it and they know it.
Well, that was kind of what that story was leading to. Because of that experience, she was like, well, maybe it is THC that is benefiting. She got a little bit more comfortable with then slowly adding some milligrams of THC into the child's dose, and we saw the seizures dramatically decrease. You know, so there's a lot. You know, there's a lot we don't know about neonatal impact and in utero impact of high level cannabis use, and I think there's people who might be watching this get nervous and go, "Oh my gosh, are they advocating for that?" I mean, there's a big difference between sitting around and taking dabs all day, right, and using certain cannabinoids as a supplement in the body. And when you look at the research of in utero use with children, right, or parents who are using cannabis, and then the children who then came through the pregnancy, when they remove comorbidity, right, things like alcohol use and smoking and other factors, there's really nothing that shows any harm. And that's still, even with that, that's not saying we're advocating or recommending parents abuse cannabis in high levels. It's just we need to learn to differentiate. There's more than one way we can use cannabis now, and it's a night and day difference in some of these supplements if the parents are having issues that are possibly more beneficial and less harmful than, say, SSRI inhibitor, right? Some of those things that we know can cause problems in utero. But if the mom, say, is dealing with depression, I wouldn't say jump and just start using cannabis. But if you have the choices between some of these drugs that we know can cause in utero problems and a low dose cannabinoid supplement that can deal with what might be causing a regulatory issue that can cause some depression or some of those things that can happen in pregnancy. It's just about looking at what is safe and best for the mother and child. And we're at the point now where if you get over that fear that cannabis is not this evil, dangerous drug, and there's really no science to back it up, and you compare it to what would be offered at the pharmacy, it's just about, what is the least impactful with the most chance of a positive benefit. And I think cannabis falls way before a lot of these other drugs that are given to women in pregnancy.
And I think that it's important to note that, women are also utilizing cannabis in their pregnancy for, things that they have. That's an ailment that's going on with them. They're utilizing it as their medicine as well. One thing I'd like to note, saying that I don't advocate in the same way that you do in large doses, and I certainly don't advocate for women to be smoking during their pregnancy. Hot smoke cuts off the vaso movement in the placental from the mother to the baby. So it's very important that if they are utilizing cannabis, smoking it in large doses, I don't recommend at all.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate you have to just mention that because that's what a lot of people visualize right away, so we got to keep putting that qualifier on there to realize that there's different types of relationships that you can have, and some can be very beneficial and safe.
I wanted to throw something out here. I think it was Russo who presented the idea of what he's calling cannabinoid deficiency syndromes, and it's a plural. And the idea is that there's all these conditions that we've found that humans are subject to that seem to respond to cannabis therapies. And most of them are ingested cannabis, again, where we see the really dramatic results. And it's Russo, I believe it was Russo. Do you remember, Forrest? Was it Russo?
Yeah, endocannabinoid deficiency syndrome is, Russo's baby.
Cannabinoid deficiency syndrome. And yeah, what blew my mind about this was the idea that all these conditions, from epilepsy to autism to certain cancers, et cetera, all these things that respond to cannabinoids are happening in the human population because the human population, due to prohibition, is suffering from a collective cannabinoid deficiency. And as we start adding the cannabinoids to our bodies, I think of CBD as the molecule that helps your body find the state that we call health. It's a homeostatic regulator. It helps the body find the condition we call health. And
it's adaptogenic.
Among other things, yes, exactly. It helps the body find health.
Yeah, I just had I did an episode of my podcast with Dr. Jeffrey Hergenrather, and he went into cannabis as an adaptogen in that conversation. That we could do a whole show on that. I'm really interested in talking more about that, but I want to do the show so I can learn more about it. I'm not ready to speak a bunch about it, but yeah, really, really interesting conversation and how it pertained to some of maybe the misunderstandings about cannabis, about what cannabis does what, but without taking into account that cannabis can do different things at different times because of the body's ability to use it in different ways. It's really fascinating.
We really resonate with using polypores and medicinal mushrooms in this equation too, and I would love to see our community get more involved in that and being able to take different compounds from medicinal mushrooms and put its magic, which, you know, is a perfect fusion to the human body as well.
And other adaptogenic Chinese herbs, you know, that really share different terpenes that cannabis has, as well as cannabinoids that cannabis has as well. It's just really interesting to look at what other sources that we can get it from, so that we can get a more holistic, more rounded you know, view of it, as well as a medicine.
It's an opportunity to bring all, you know, modalities together and be able to, you know, bring the cannabis in with the Chinese herbs and in with the polypores that we get from our forest. And, you know, we have amazing polypores in our forest, and we're finding incredible results by bringing it together with cannabinoid medicine. So,
you know, through Paul Stamets' work, of course, he's doing tremendous amounts of work with true polypores and mixing cannabis with that as well.
And we read as much Japanese and Russian stuff as possible, but you know, it's PDF files are there. It's pretty mind blowing, and they work together with medical industry as well.
Oh yeah, I see mycelium running.
Can I take a moment, Wade, to just compliment you on your shirt there? That I'm quite a fan of it so far this morning.
That's awesome.
Yes, we're drinking our medicinal mushrooms right now. We're drinking mushrooms.
Yes. No, I think that part of what we're speaking to is that my experience of cannabis, it is one of the healing plants, and there's I think there's reasons that humans have been interested in all these different herbs, mushrooms, and I'm pretty convinced that science can do a lot for us about helping to understand some of the modalities, some of the things that happen to make nature what it is. But I'm also pretty confident that science has a very limited view of the totality of things that are going on. And there's a wisdom in herbalism. There's something going on with those plants and how our bodies relate to them. And I think what we're doing here today in the church is exploring how cannabis is one of those healing plants that we are all drawn to very strongly. But I think there's other things going on. And really, part of what I'm here for is a sense of well-being and happiness and health that cannabis helps me experience. But I use other herbs as well as mushrooms. I really view mushrooms as a really great sign in the garden. When mushrooms are happening in the garden, everybody's happy in the garden. Stamets' research on bees and the benefits that they're finding for honeybees, who are an essential friend in all of our lives. Yeah.
And I think that it's really important too when we start talking about blending different plants, and looking for different compounds and medicinal compounds, and these ancient Chinese herbs that have been studied, forever, that, talk about evidence and Ayurvedic Chinese herbs. We do know so much about it, but maybe modern science hasn't stepped into the picture. So all of a sudden, we don't know anything about it, but there is a tremendous amount of research. And I'm really interested in taking all of that research of herbs and then feeding it to those master plants. So trying to create more terpenes with terpenes, going to those master plants that have been looked at forever and ever and ever, collecting them from the woods and the forest, and then feeding them to themselves or creating different compounds.
Making teas out of those and building the soil microbes, because the soil microbes are the actual true key to the medicine. We can talk all day about what we're going to do with all of our secondary metabolites when we get them, but to be able to get the most complex, intricate cannabinoid systems or terpene profiles starts with soil, and a diverse soil. And if we can get into herbalism for teas and herbalism for soils and herbalism for soil rhizosphere activity,
we can really raise our terpenes.
Then all of a sudden everything's vibrating. The soil's vibrating, the medicine's vibrating, we're vibrating, and it's beautiful. And there is a difference. It's not just like folklore. It really comes out in the labs. It comes out in people's reaction to wanting to buy the medicine and everything. It's a really full
how it
spectrum
makes them feel.
thing.
So, you know, medicine is something that we can test in science, but medicine is also something that we can test when we ingest it. And if we're giving the medicine everything that we can, a full spectrum from other plants and other medicinal plants, then we're also familiarizing our own immune system, our own DNA with those medicinal plants that, you know, as far as our DNA goes and our structure from the very beginning, we've been utilizing these plants, you know, from the beginning.
Respectful evolution.
Kind of a step back for a second. In one of the things that I understand about traditional Chinese medicine was the original agreement in a village between the healer and the folk who lived in the village was that the people who wanted this healer's help would offer whatever they had, some portion of it, to them to help them maintain a sense of health, well-being. And as long as you were healthy, you kept paying the healer. But if you got sick, they treated you at no cost. Our Western medicine, our medical system today is set up that no one gets paid until somebody's sick. And there's a problem there. It's not in the interests of our medical system, if you will, to show us and teach us how to maintain health. And then in the traditional Chinese culture, it was about maintaining health. So these herbs that I've had good experience with acupuncture, getting way off subject here, but I'm really talking about health at the moment and the sense of well-being. And I really think that science is helping us to understand why we don't feel healthy, but I don't think science has the full answer on how to get healthy. I think nature, we evolved with nature and all these plants, and I think that is where we can find well-being, is in nature and how nature can work together with us. And it involves finding all of these things that we were speaking of. But yeah, the sense of health, the sense of well-being, of being in your body and feeling good in it.
I call it
something
happy.
that I think everyone wants. What's that?
I call it happy.
Yes.
Happiness is so elusive. Yes. People go looking for it. They'll look for it everywhere. They just can't find it. They're like, where the hell is it? They catch little glimpses of it. They're like, I was feeling it for a few seconds there. Did you notice? I was happy. Happiness is health. It's balance. It's well-roundedness. It's definitely a lot more than using cannabis as a medicine. I'll tell you that much. I see a lot of people in the industry who just need to get a healthier diet, be a little more active, exercise, you know, because cannabis is one part of the puzzle for sure, but I don't think it will bring happiness alone.
Well, happiness is the proper balance of those chemical soup that your body is. It's this, you know, depression versus, you know, manic joy is all which neurotransmitters flowing on what level. And it's funny that when we look at tying in cannabis to this, when we look at ways to influence your endocannabinoid system, whose sole job is to keep the body in balance, in homeostasis, to provide that optimal setup for your body. The best ways to influence that system that have nothing to do with cannabis are diet and exercise. When you're exercising, when your diet is good, you influence the way your endocannabinoid system functions. So yeah, when you are doing those things, and we've known that for years and years and years, what we didn't know is how much that effort was really benefiting the endocannabinoid system and supporting its ability to keep the body healthy and in balance. So, you know,
and I think, yeah, exercise. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, go ahead.
It's hard coming in on the mute thing. I think that exercise is really important, and it's, you know, also healthy microbes. Happy microbes, happy beneficial bacteria inside of our body makes us happy. And I think that, you know, when we are doing healthy things for ourselves and we're treating our soils with good things, then we're getting the healthy microbiology. And I think that, you know, they have the higher intelligence. There's way more of them than there is us. And I think that if we are able to, you know, ally with them in a way that, you know, is more open to our culture, you know, we're just starting to get into bifidus and lactobacillus and all the prebiotics and the probiotics. And now it's starting to become sort of a regular term. You know, I see it on TV, you know, in just regular commercials. So hopefully we can, you know, start gaining more and more intelligence from those microbes as a culture to help us out and along the way to create a higher intelligence.
Just like you have to oxygenate your teas, you have to oxygenate your blood and oxygenate, you know, through cardiovascular movement. That's part of why gardening is health, is because you're ingesting soil microbes in your fingers and you're utilizing your body, you're stretching, you're doing like garden yoga, and you're getting weeds, and you have to oxygenate your soils too. You have to have like aeration in your soils. So
and more research is being done, you know, on a medical scientific study that people who are having a lot of ailments, you know, autoimmune disorders, seizures, people that are having IBS, people that are even having cancer, all we're doing, you know, they're doing is looking into the microbiome inside of the intestine and realizing that, you know, they're totally devoid of a lot of different microbiology that they should have in order to be healthy. So I think that this is sort of all wrapped up into one thing.
Endocannabinoid system, microbiome.
It's interesting. You said there's more of them than us, but I guess when it comes to bacteria, they are us.
Yeah. So where do you draw that line?
It's like, holy shit. Just what I was thinking. Good conversations today. We busted out some, went pretty deep so far. I like it.
And the mitochondria is a whole other aspect that's really fascinating. And the whole mitochondrial DNA has its own DNA that surrounds all of our cells. Is a whole other entity with inside of our body that's just so unbelievable.
Yeah, that's totally living being as well. So that's digesting and thinking and breathing for us as well. It's really, really interesting wormhole that we can go down for sure. But having a healthy immune system creates a healthy immune response.
And this is why we love
cannabis is a great catalyst in our thinking towards that, which is awesome. A lot of us are thinking about it when we're utilizing cannabis, you know, but you do have to go further. Like you said, Marcus, you know, it's not just about just utilizing cannabis.
But cannabis like gives us the mindset to sit back and connect and think about all these amazing things and then go out and put it to use and practice, and then having this community to share it with. And because we can't all do everything, and once we have it all to share with, then I think that we have the most amazing benefits. And recently in the last few years, there have been some pretty things that have happened within growing and cultivating, and also within medicine and all the extracts. I mean, it's like never ending really fun things. It's almost like exciting to wake up every day to find out like what new thing we get to learn about. And so thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I feel like I can only imagine 20 years from now what we'll know about these relationships, these compounds, and how they interact with not just sick people, but healthy people, you know, as preventative, the whole, it's really there's gonna be this eventual, we're such humans. We just divide. We divide everything, we cut it all up, we categorize it, and then eventually we come around, and it seems that, for me, what I'm coming around to is the quiver. You know, for earlier having the conversation about the difference between oil and hash, I was by no means saying that one is better than the other. For me, I have a preference, but there's always going to be different preferences for different reasons. And that's why monomolecular medicine will have its place. And that's why, you know, FICO will have its place. And that's why all the different types of extracts, ones that we don't even know about right now, will have their place. Because it's unique, it's different, and it changes small things. When we leave that footprint behind, when we change those volatile terpenes that we know modulate the effects of the cannabinoids, then we know that by changing the way we make the medicine, we're changing the medicine.
Yeah, so speaking of volatile terpenes, Forrest, how do you decarboxylate but still maintain your terpene profile? I mean, that seems to be a trick in the industry. A lot of people are removing terpenes and reincorporating after any kind of thermal treatment whatsoever, because the most delicate of terpenes, which is the most delicate part of the fragrance, will thermally rearrange or decompose and give you off flavors from what you've extracted. So are there any secrets on that?
Yes. All right. Okay. Well, yeah, I've got nothing really fancy to offer. I mean, we are hometown sort of folks, but we definitely don't just decarboxylate in an oven and let everything get lost onto the walls of your oven. So we keep everything contained when we're decarboxylating. And when we're doing our ethanol rinses, we rinse the containers that we decarboxylate in. You can actually see them build up on the surface of those things to integrate them back into the medicine. And it sounds kind of country doing it, but through test results and through experience, we've seen it makes a real difference, that you can actually capture those terpenes in the decarboxylation process, and then we rinse the containers and bags with the alcohol to strip any terpenes that have collected during that process. Otherwise, they just are all on the outside of your oven wall or something like that, whatever you're decarbing in.
So do you recover your ethanol, and then how many times do you use it before you don't use it anymore, or you keep on using it?
No, it definitely loses something, as you know, I'm sure. But what we do is we kind of reconstitute it by adding in fresh as you go, right? And it's like a cycle that goes through, and it allows it to stay pretty fresh. And then you're losing enough in the soak and the rinse where you're not getting all of your alcohol back. So you're constantly having to add fresh into it. So we're constantly adding fresh alcohol into it. So say we reclaim 80%, then the next batch has 20% that is fresh, and so on. And we haven't seen it lost.
What is it that's extracted that fouls the ethanol, right? I mean, it's not a terpene, it's a sugar or something like that? Or what makes the ethanol no good anymore? And at that point, is it actually worth it to actually just buy a still and distill that ethanol to recover it? Because ethanol, could be damn expensive because it's a controlled dangerous substance, and you have to have a license for it. And a lot of people have to get paid to. Even this bioethanol is a pain in the ass. There's supply chain, people that have their pockets open that want to make a lot of money here. But the question that I'm asking you is that, so when you recover your ethanol, you'll use it like maybe once, twice, or how many times can you use it to where it no longer has good extraction?
We're using organic alcohol. We can get it at 200 proof. We have to drive a long way to get it, but I guess we're not throwing it out because we're constantly making batches that it's just recycled through it. So, we're not seeing that loss. It's when we don't constantly add fresh in every single time that it goes bad. And I would, I wish I had the answer. I got to plead ignorance there as to why it goes bad. I can't wrap my brain around it. I was hoping maybe you guys could let me know as to what changes, because it's still high octane alcohol and ethanol when it comes out, but it's just we've all experienced it. It's just it doesn't work and pull the same after a while. So yeah, we don't have that problem much because we constantly add fresh in. So we're not necessarily dumping any out. What we lose in the wash and in the soak is enough volume is when we replace it with clean, fresh alcohol every time, that we don't have the same problem.
You said you lost about 20% each run?
Well, I mean, I'm generalizing, but my medicine makers might be watching this going, Forrest, you got your numbers all wrong, and shaking their heads with me. But simplifying, we lose 10 to maybe say 10%, 20% each time, and then we reconstitute.
I'm sure it's very material dependent in general, right? I mean, everything is material dependent.
Yeah, it's how dry was it, which that's a huge step as well. I mean, we could do a whole episode on our med making process, which I'd be happy to do. But a lot of times when people are distilling or doing ethanol washes, they don't dry out the material enough. I mean, it's got to be to the point where you think it's ruined, right? You would never do it for cannabis that you were smoking, like crumbling in your hands, dry, because it's the water that is going to cause problems in there. So, when you do that, it's also going to then absorb a lot of alcohol. So you definitely lose. That's where we lose the majority of our alcohol, is in that step.
Where do you?
We always use the desiccator with the cannabis before we put it in with the alcohol.
I was gonna say you could freeze dry that some product, and you'd be surprised how it turned out.
Awesome.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, it's all quite interesting, isn't it? All the different ways to make medicine or to acquire medicine that's already there. Let's be honest. We're not making anything. We're just sort of.
Well, I look at it as the same as, we can grow cannabis and we can all grow the same cannabis, and there's going to be a certain amount of people who ruin it during the curing and drying process, right? So it's like, how do we just get the best process we can? We're all going to end up with something at the end of it. But just like everything, how can we help the plant maintain its full potential? You
don't see it very often, at least I don't, and I do see a lot of cannabis. I saw some yesterday that I felt like, wow, this is some of the first cannabis in a while that has expressed itself to its maximum potential. It was just really covered in this beautiful, beautiful coating of trichomes. It smelt impeccable. It felt like velour. And it was just nice to see someone grow bud that is actually attuned to the infamous local BC brokerage term, quads. Oh, geez. Everyone's selling mid-grade swag as quads. This is the problem. People are using and throwing around words that aren't accurate, and I like to be a bit of a stickler. And I apologize if I come across as a dick, because I do that. It's all I was doing with saying that hash and oil are different. Otherwise, they wouldn't have different names. They're different processes. They're different products. They're great. Words matter. I think so. What are quads, yabba gabba? Well, this is the way it happened. In the 90s, when I was involved in the game, it didn't go as high. It didn't go as high as quads. It was triples. And it was triples were triple A's, A being the highest quality that you could get, and triple A being ridiculous quality. So it's something that you just, it's the trips. You want the trips. And then buddy brings you a 50 pack of mushrooms and you're like, no, dude, like, oh my God. Okay, I'll take the mushrooms, but it's the herb I wanted. I've always been a firm supporter of the mushroom. The same way cannabis helped me change the way I think and look at things differently, I got an incredible amount of value from psychedelic mushrooms. And I wasn't really like eat a bunch and go to fish shows, although I did enough of that. It was more like go and with like 1 or 2 people and really like go into the trip. Learned an incredible amount about myself and about kind of the world and the way it works just through these experiences. So I would never downplay psychedelic mushrooms. I definitely feel that, well, you see people now taking, what are they taking it for? Is it low doses for PTSD and some other ailments? Depression.
Maps.org.
Great work. Yeah, Maps.
Amazing website. They have incredible work on all kinds of different medicinal systems.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had.
And I mean, you receive amazing teachings through psychedelics and through journeys. That's why they're journeys.
You can, for sure. I mean, you can also have like the worst experience ever, depending on your setting and the people you're doing it with it and your intentions. But I was like Bill Hicks. I was like, I hate to tell you, I had a lot of fun on drugs, where he does that little sort of, I had a great time on psychedelic mushrooms. I think of them as definitely, as important as my views on cannabis are. I have a strong feeling that psychedelic mushrooms will, and not just psychedelic mushrooms, but mushrooms as a whole, will come to offer, more than we could have ever possibly imagined. Even though Paul Stamets is really blowing the lid off this shit right now. Anyone wants to go and watch a Paul Stamets video. This particular one, How Mushrooms Can Save the World, that this book is based on, which I think originally was one of his TED Talks. And it was like, I think it was called 6 Ways Mushrooms Can Save the World. Definitely standing ovation type shit. I would love to have Paul on Hash Church one day. It would be amazing if anyone knew how to reach out to Paul.
I could reach out to him. He definitely would. I mean, his time is of the essence at the moment, so his work is right. He loves, cannabis and the psychoactive. He's totally that's the beautiful thing about Paul. And we've spent days with him, and I've even done the Cortez workshop with him at Hollyhock.
Nice.
5 days.
And we've done a lot of fun, really fun times at the Oregon Country Fair late night, seeing in the early mornings. For sure.
That book is an accumulation of all of this work and everything that he's been doing, along with his crew, because it's Paul Stamos, but it's his crew and everyone that works at Fungi Perfecti, in Olympia, and his wife, his partner, and they're all just on a high level, and it's really amazing what they're doing.
They're all
along with. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah. That would be a good one.
I got to sort of play a little trick on Paul at one of the psychedelic symposiums that were up in Whistler. Very small gatherings, the psychedelic family, much smaller than the cannabis family. But he walked by my booth, and I had a picture of a trichome. Like I think it was from Joop Dumas, the Dutch photographer that used the microscopy. I can't even pronounce it. Anyway, he had this incredible, still to this day, one of the greatest trichome shots ever taken. And I showed it to Paul, and I said, "Can you identify this mushroom?" And it just stopped him in his tracks. He was like looking at it all intently. And after about a minute, I said, you know, it's a trichome. It's a glandular trichome from a cannabis plant. And he was just like, "Man, you had me stumped." I was like, "Yeah, you're never going to figure this one out." It's the weed
mushroom. What kind of mushroom is it? Oh my God, it's translucent mushroom. What's happening here?
How does like, why does it look like it's lit up? I'm like, oh yeah, it's it looked so big too. It was a full-page picture of a full. You couldn't really tell it was small. He was probably thinking it was like, you know, much bigger than it was.
You should have photoshopped it so it looked like it was bruised and blue.
Yeah, that would have been it right there. Yeah, I found these on my property. They're about the size of ants. When you eat one, the entire world just splits open. And light casts shadow that creates a language that you learn instantaneously upon seeing. Hey, Tony, we're going deep. We're talking about psychedelics. What's going on, dude?
That's a good conversation.
I was just saying to invite anyone that knew Paul Stamets to invite him into Hash Church, because man, wouldn't we love to have that conversation? And our friends at Dragonfly Medicine were like, "We know Paul. We'll invite him." How are things with you, Tony?
Good, man. I've just been pulling some all-nighters, trying to figure out all kinds of little technical things, but I'm good. How about you? You guys?
It is today my son's 3rd birthday. So and the only reason I'm really not doing Hash Church is because he's sick right now. So he's just sleeping. He's not feeling good. He's got a fever, and he's just been sick for like 3 days. So it's a bummer. You just hate when kids get sick.
That's no good. It usually means you'll get sick soon.
I'm not, you know what, as a parent, it's like, whatever. I mean, I would take his sickness in the blink of an eye times 10. But it's how they build immune systems. So you just hope that they're on the right path, and that the fever is doing the good work instead of the bad work.
Well, I can tell you, I made a post about this earlier in the week. This is the CBN.
Jesus.
Yeah, there's something there actually.
I saw that post. That looks ridiculous.
I should say it's CBN and CBC. So, but mostly CBN.
Is this the one you saw the color changing happening with? Is this that extra?
Yeah, it goes clear. I mean, it's pretty clear. Just in that giant jar, it looked yellow. But my first experience, I was going to load a pen, but my first experience was on Friday night. And I'm going to make some claims here about CBN, because I don't think we've had a lot of experience vaporizing full concentrates of CBN. But had a couple people try it. Interesting enough, I think that, you know, that kind of forgetfulness, spacey head kind of feeling that you get when you smoke a joint or you smoke some older herb, that kind of couch lock feeling that you kind of get, we all kind of think of like CBN. But the spaciness, like when you hit it, it like it kind of, I could see why I could see why I went to sleep and slept so well on Friday night. But it kind of, I don't know, it kind of makes you forget about what you're thinking about, and then
I wonder if that's CBN or a lack of pinene.
I don't know. I mixed this with clementine terpenes just to give it some kind of modulation effect, so it could play an effect. But I mean, it was like this. I smoked it. I didn't cough, and it kind of like, I wouldn't say the forgetfulness comes from it, but like when you you almost like lost for words a little bit. You're just kind of like, oh, that's kind of strange. I'm a little spacey, and then you're like, maybe you can't pronounce words or like anything right away. I wouldn't say it's kind of that drastic, but it's like if my mind was wound up and I was talking a whole bunch and I hit that, it definitely silences you. So you're like,
I remember because you were talking to me.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I was talking to you like a million miles an hour, and then
and then you were like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it kind of
somebody get my fucking golf shoes,
There's something there.
Well, and I didn't cough, and I was like, oh, that's strange. And maybe it was the Delta 8 or the CBC, but there was this like delayed effect. I was just kind of like, okay, it kind of calmed me down. But then I started to yawn, and I got tired, and then I slept for 10 hours. So for sure, it helps with sleeping. For sure, it calms your mind, and I could see like for PTSD and for different things, it helps you forget, and that's not a bad thing.
No,
that's not a bad thing. So,
how much of a dose do you think you got, and how did you feel the next morning?
Oh, I didn't feel anything in the head. I didn't feel
not groggy or anything the next morning.
Nope. No, I'll smoke some right now. It's not going to help, but I mean, I just woke up, so let's see. But it's definitely unusual. I definitely think it could go in a pen. With clementine terpenes or any other terpenes paired with it, it's really nice. It doesn't taste like cherry at all. There's no cherry taste to it. There's no, it's very medicinal. It's not, it doesn't have like your normal, I don't know, it doesn't have any kind of cherry taste. It doesn't, and it's absolutely clean on the nail. I mean, I'll show it to you. There's nothing, there's absolutely nothing. So I'll show it to you. Let's see.
Just clean on the nail.
Clean, man. Let's show you.
Nice. Yeah, Napa Valley's like Tony's gonna fall asleep on stream.
Well, look at this stuff. Yeah. Can you see this?
Yes.
You can see that, right?
Keep doing it. Just
that is so beautiful.
Do that for 30 more minutes. It is making me tired.
That's like nerd porn for, cannabis science junkies right there.
I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. It was testing like close to 50% CBN and like, it's quite a bit of CBC in it. I have to look at that again. There's quite a bit of Delta. There's no THCA or THC in it.
Can't even see it on the fucking.
What's the other 50%?
The other 50% is Roundup.
Yeah, Roundup.
Yeah, it's Roundup CBN new Bubble Man pen.
Look how much vapor I get. No cough. And normally I cough. You guys all know that.
So I know CBN doesn't work that way because it's a byproduct of THC, but is the rest of the components, are they activated in their acidic form with as clear as it is,
Well, I think I posted the test result on the capsule. The capsule kind of shows you when, but that has CBD in it. So I'll post the regular one. So the thing with it, and Mark could probably like this, and so if you take And the first time they started testing, and if you take like the pure CBN extract and take like, you know, a concentrate of it, it's off the GC. It's like off the scale. So, you know, diluting it 4 times before you test it gives you a much more accurate reading. I'm not really sure what the rest of it is, Mark, because it's as clear as can be. You can see it on the side, how thick it is. But, yeah, I don't know. It's not like...
Was it distilled?
This was molecularly distilled. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so something that's distilled, I mean, if it is about 50% one thing and 50% something else, I mean, typically a distillation...
It was 90%. It was 90%. It was a 90% THC with only THC.
Oh, it was not... okay, so say that again. I thought you said it was 50%. Didn't you say...
No, so check this out. You could do this with rosin or distillate. So if you did it with rosin, right, and you made it, and we've done this with, we've made a distillation from rosin, which you'll lose about 30% of your weight in terpenes and fats and other bullshit from the hash rosin. You could get to like a 90% activated THC. You could do that also from distillate. So if you're molecularly distilling, and if you start with a 85 or 90% THC, you could also start with THCA, which is something I don't know if you guys talked about today, but I definitely wanted to put the instructions up and get people on the THCA tip of how to do that. You could start with a couple different things, but ultimately if you start with THCA, you got to convert it to THC. And that's pretty easy to do in a rosin as well. You could take a hash rosin, you could double boil that, you could gently and slowly activate it from THC to THC. Then you could make a distillation from it if you had enough of it. Once you get to 90% though, and you've cleaned up what's supposed to be any of the, you know, contaminants and stuff left behind, then the process that we do, not necessarily mine to share with, but it then does not use your traditional heat and distillation methods. It uses a completely different method in which does not lose any weight. So we would go from 90. So if you start with a kilo of 90% THC, you end up with 950 grams. Very little is lost in the process, if any. And it's a little bit more than a 50% conversion without a volume loss. It's pretty substantially crazy. I didn't really believe it until.
So if it's a 50% conversion, that means you still have 50% THC?
Nope, it goes away.
Well, if it's a 50% conversion, only 50% of it is converting it.
Well, I'm sorry. You go from 90%. And we ended up around 48 to 50% CBN with no THC present left.
So is it just, all right, Mark, well, here you go. Explain that. Is that just the breakdown of the molecule itself?
I don't understand. Those numbers don't add up to me. So I'm...
No, that's really simple. It means that there was 100% conversion, but the yield was only 50%.
So, okay, so I will tell you this. So if you start with a kilo that's testing 86% or 860 milligrams, and you end up with 500 milligrams of CBN, it appears that the CBC was I don't know if it was a converted byproduct, but there was high levels of CBC that were not there before. So
that doesn't make any sense at all to me.
That's crazy. No, that's awesome.
It doesn't make any sense because you need a synthase to convert CBC into either CBD or THC, and that requires, there's electrons required there. So there's chemistry going on there that doesn't make sense to me. You shouldn't have CBC in there if there wasn't to begin with.
It really doesn't make sense. We we did a lot of work on CBC varieties and developed varieties that were the majority of the cannabinoids in the plant were CBC.
Hold on, let me see if CBC was in the original starting oil. Hold on a second. I took a picture of the test score. Let me see. It might be talking out my ass. Hold on a second. Let me see.
Tony, is this the same process where you saw the color changing effects based on temperature? Is this the same?
No, this has nothing to do with the temperature.
Oh, I thought the post said it was due to the temperature it was changing colors.
Oh no! If you just take that oil at the end and warm it up, it goes clear.
No, I thought what you were doing is you were starting with a THC isolate and you were converting it to CBN to make a something that's 50% by weight CBN. I thought that's what you said you were doing.
Yeah, no, this is, imagine you start with like 1,200 grams of hash rosin. You end up with 1,000 grams of rosin distillate, just without alcohol. You fractionate and then.
This is high THC, a high THC variety?
Yeah, I mean, the rosin's like 80% as it is, and you get it to 90 and you remove all the terpenes and all the bullshit.
Right.
And then, let's see if I can find this. And then the same weight, it doesn't change weight, it just converts all of that THC from a 90% to 46% CBN.
And then there's 56% of nothing showing up in the test
Wait
results.
a second. They're two different molecules with two different molecular weights. And so to go from THC to CBN, you basically have to lose 2 moles of hydrogen, right? And that's in a dehydrogenation process to aromatize the north ring of THC. When you're looking at the chicken wire, north ring will now look like a benzene ring because it'll now be fully unsaturated. So in that process, you have to lose 2 moles of H2. So it's different in molecular weight. I mean, just like THCA and THC are different.
Right.
So what you're extracting in the rosin process is first like THCA, then that's carboxylated to make THC, and that undergoes this dehydrogenation reaction to make CBN. So that's what's going on, and it seems like you just have a distribution of all either cannabinoid acids that have been decarboxylated and now partially converted over to CBN. And in that partial conversion, there could also be what's called dihydro, so you have tetrahydrocannabinol. You have what I make when I hydrogenate, which is hexahydro. So hexahydro, no double bond at all. Naturally in the plant, tetrahydro. Then there's dihydro, which is with 2 double bonds, and then it's thermodynamically downhill to lose that last mole of hydrogen to make CBN. So yeah, you'll have everything populated along that profile. Probably it depends on if they're using some type of co-oxidant or what type of oxidation procedure they're using.
No oxygen.
So okay, no oxygen.
So this no heat or oxygen. So that's the only thing I can tell you is that.
Because you need something to overcome the activation energy barrier between there and there.
Well, it's like I said, it's not really my process to share. It was co-developed, but it's all I can tell you is that
it sounds like it needs improvement.
I don't think so at all.
Well, if it's only a 50% yield, right?
What are you talking about? So here's okay. So here's how here's how I was currently doing it: taking sift, farmer's grade sift, and putting it into a chamber that has heat and oxygen for degradation for a week at a time to get to convert from 250 milligrams of, let's say, THCA, right, in its SIF form, down to 70 milligrams of CBN. And if I started with a kilo of SIFT, I end up losing, like, the weight of the keef isn't 1,000 grams when I get it back. It's like, 500-600 grams. And I also lost the, maybe not quite that much, but I'm losing like 70+% in the conversion doing it that way with heat and oxygen. What I'm saying to you now is when I have a kilo of rosin or distillate, I get the same kilo back and the conversion rate is extremely well. I'm happy with the 50% conversion rate and no volume, no weight loss. You know what I mean?
Right, but this is where I'm having a difficult time following you, Tony. So if you're only getting 50% conversion, that means in your starting material,
have you found any way to convert it at a better rate from THC to CBN?
No. Oh, hold on a second. No, I'm not trying to make CBN, but I'm just trying to understand what you're holding up in the jar. So if what you're saying is that you're only getting 50% conversion, does that mean the other 50% that's not converting, does that stay as THC? You say that there's no THC in the product. So what's the other 50%? I'm just curious.
Oh yeah, no, I'm with you, because and the lab's also having kind of a hard time testing. So we've tested this like 4 different ways. What I can tell you is when we mixed everything and we said, okay, here's our final capsule with CBD oil in it too, we were the only thing in it was CBD, CBN, Delta 8, and CBC. In the original oil, let me see if I could find it. Let me see. Hold on, I'm going to find it right now. I'll tell you exactly what. I'll tell you exactly what was in it.
Did they look for Delta 8?
Yeah, they looked for Delta 8. Hold on.
Okay, cool.
No. This is SC Labs. This went through a lot of different testing. Hold on. I wouldn't have put it out there if it didn't. Let's see here. Okay. Okay. What is this one?
Yeah, so as a chemist, again, if I have a reaction that only goes 50% completion, I want that reaction to go to 100% completion. So that's what I mean in terms of the opportunity to take what you got here, figure out how to push it the rest of the 50%. But go ahead.
No. Okay, maybe I'm saying it wrong. It converts all of the THC to CBN, but the rate at which it converts it is about 50% of what it started with. So let me read you what was in the starting oil, okay?
So some of it's not changing. Some of it's changing into something else.
But rate, when you say the rate is a measure of how fast the reaction is.
No, I think what, Tony, correct me if I'm wrong here, you have essentially the same volume at the end, but instead of a 90% concentration the THC was, all the THC is gone. You have the same volume, but you have a 50% concentration of CBN.
Correct.
Right. So what's the other?
What's the other stuff? Right. That's.
Bro, I would love to know. So that's why I'm asking you. So let me tell you what was in it. So try to figure it out, because it is mind blowing. I've been blown away for about 2 months now working on this, and so okay, the starting oil. This is all through SE Labs, so this was tested twice, just to make sure. But let's say the starting oil was 82, so it's an 82% THC, no Delta 8. There was okay, so it's 82.46 THC. It was 0.57 THCV, 1.19 CBC, 1.43 CBG, 0.57 CBN, 0.22 CBD, and 0.26 CBDA. When it came out, the only thing it had, hold on a second. Okay, here it is. Now, when it came back out, it had no more THC, no more THCA, no CBD, no CBDA. It had 400 plus like 460 milligrams of CBN, no CBDV, no CBDVA, no CBG, no CBGA, no THCV, 42 milligrams of Delta 8, and 77 milligrams of CBC. So it's over 50 milligrams. And of that was, it looks like 10% of it or 20% of it was CBC and 10% was Delta 8. Then I put that into a capsule to dilute it, to get it with CBD oil to try to make our P4. Hold on. And that came out to, that had, oh, that was the wrong one. Hold on. That one came out to, I got that one over here. Okay, that one came out to no THC, no THCA, which is fine. Our CBD that was in there was 44 milligrams, no CBDA. Then it was 35 milligrams of CBN, no other components except 6 milligrams of Delta 8 and 21 milligrams of CBC. Now, a capsule is a half a gram, and that lines up with exactly the oil numbers of the CBN. So that actually all does line up. But what I'm saying to you is CBC was not that much prevalent. So perhaps, I don't know where all the CBC came from. If what you're saying is that when you convert THC to CBN, like it wouldn't create CBC, is what you're saying.
I don't know. It depends the process. You know, if you have again, so it sounds like a proprietary low temperature process.
No temperature.
You're doing chemistry. I mean, you're taking the components and you're rearranging the deck chairs. And I don't know exactly. You have to look at the chemistry and you look at the reaction manifolds. Could CBC be formed? All the building blocks are there. You know, basically, you're just rearranging the same atoms that are there in the molecules, and there has to be sort of thermodynamic driving force for those rearrangements. They don't just happen on their own. They're either initiated by heat or light or some type of microbial degradation. I mean, there's all kinds of like degraded in cannabinoids that end up going towards CBN, because CBN is somewhat of a thermodynamic dead end. I think El Soli had pointed out that there's hydroxylated metabolites. I think the 8-hydroxy THCs and whatnot. Those are all, if you heat those up, they immediately lose water, dehydrate. Now it makes dihydro THC, which again goes to CBN almost instantly. So yeah, those are all thermodynamically downhill from where the molecules in the plant are. So when you start heating things, or when you treat them with catalysts, or treat them with any type of stress, to put stress on those most sensitive molecules, especially ones that can equilibrate over to other isomers, which is what CBC is, right? CBC is an isomer of THC.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know quite the answer to why or how, I guess, but I'm pretty happy with the conversion. I mean, if there was a way, I guess what you're saying, the next step would be if you can convert 86%, 800 and something milligrams of THC to 800 and something milligrams of THC or CBN, then yeah, that would be amazing. But I don't think that's ever going to be possible.
You would think in a distillation that you would get a cleaner cut, or that you would actually, if you're doing a short path distillation here, that you'd be able to take several cuts during that distillation to look at, like, can you actually get rid of the minor cannabinoid fractions there in an earlier cut, and then later in the distillation major cut is going to be just more purified CBN. CBN is, right, and Sam will correct me on this, a white crystalline compound. So if it's pure, like CBD, can be purified to essentially be a white.
Yeah, so the scientists that I was working with on this, I asked them about like breaking out CBN, and they said, yeah, you won't be able to do it with terpenes or anything because of the polarity and the way that THCA or CBD breaks out is totally different than CBN. I'm curious to see, like, because that is the next step. Now, how do I take this to a 99%?
No, there's ways that you could quantitatively convert THC that's been isolated, like the clear, quantitatively convert it all over to CBN. And then if it's not all converted, you could then clean it up in chromatography or distillation to basically make an analytically pure sample.
But do you have to? But would you use a solvent in that process?
Depending on, you mean the dehydrogenation of THC itself?
Yeah, would a solvent touch
the
it?
Process by which you create it? Yeah, you probably have to do that in a solvent, or though you could be probably creative and figure out a way to do it without using a solvent. But you know that would require some engineering. But yeah, so it's basically just a dehydrogenation reaction, right? So you have to.
This is what you kind of patented, right?
What's that? No, I actually patented the hydrogenation. That's adding hydrogen. This is
okay.
Hydrogen away. So the methyl cyclohexene ring of THC can basically lose hydrogen. And so when you see, if you're doing a distillation and you typically see white smoke coming from the distillation, that's usually indicative of CBN formation, because what is happening is that the oxygen in air is actually being hydrogenated, if you will, by the methyl cyclohexene ring to make air or to make water. And so that steam that's actually coming up from the distillation pot, when you see the white smoke coming from your distillation pot, that's typically indicative of CBN formation. So yeah, it'll happen with just air. Air is actually the oxygen in air is strong enough, but you could use other oxidants to basically promote that, to make it go at less harsh conditions. And I know Arno Haskamp published a paper, and I think did his PhD dissertation on a or one of the parts of his PhD dissertation involved the quantitative oxidation of THC to CBN, and I think that's Googleable, and you can find his dissertation on the internet.
I actually saw that once. Actually,
yeah, I think did he use like silver nitrate?
Yeah,
it was like a silver kind of stoichiometric oxidant, which I'm not sure is what you wanted, what you really wanted to do. But I think one of the things that people always get hung up on, again, is that, you know, you can convert, well, this happens to a small extent just on the nail. You know, when you're oxidizing THC in an atmosphere of oxygen, you will get some, you know, a conversion to CBN. And so you see that actually as an artifact sometimes in
what comes out of hash. But for sure, when you try to short path rosin, some weird shit comes out of it.
You heat stuff up, like if you're heating stuff up to do a high vacuum distillation, you should definitely do what you can to make sure that it's completely been dewinterized, because, you know, this is the point of having fats and waxes and something that you're heating up to these temperatures. These things don't distill. What they do is they degrade, and when they degrade, they create those off burnt rubber flavors that you don't want in your distillate. And so the best way to keep that stuff out of your distillate is to make sure that what goes into the pot is as clean as you possibly can. You know, people are using activated carbon and sieves and, you know, doing what they can to make sure that by the time you put any thermal history on that material, that you've done what you can to remove things that aren't meant to be heated up to that temperature, because those things are going to degrade and give your stuff a really off flavor.
Yeah, so one thing I would note that, and I agree with that, is that when you go from a hash rosin the way it is, like the azoline and the different weird stuff we were pulling out, I actually had it tested, and it tested for all kinds of funky stuff. It had THC in it. It was just, like you said, it was like rubbery, fishy, all these weird different kind of what I thought was terpenes, like blue terpenes and things like that. But it actually had all kinds of shit in it. But so conceptually,
a little bit of bad flavor goes a long way.
Yeah,
like a drop of some of that stuff.
Oh my God!
Completely blow your entire run. I know people again who will take those low boiling fractions, completely disassemble your unit before taking the high boiling terps, because you don't even want to contaminate the path by which you're going to collect your wonderful clean distillate with all that ass smelling crap that comes over early. And again, if I think really, if you do your distillate preparation appropriately, that fraction should actually be quite flavorful, and try to hold on to it. Yeah. I've seen blue, I've seen yellow, purple, red, all kinds of different colors.
Well, I would tell you, so check it out. So then everybody's been talking about, you know, the THCA thing, separating THCA with the rosin. I'm sure it's been a pretty big topic. I mean, it's been a pretty big topic on the internet. A lot of people making a lot of claims that they created it and what have you. I can tell you from my experience, the first time I ever saw it was our friend Matt from Straight Concentrate in 2015 when I was in Ukiah, and we had our hands on the first press. He pressed hash rosin, and then we took that, repressed it, refolded it up right in a little 25 screen, repressed that. Out came super sappy oil, and inside
You're talking Matt Armstrong, who's with Chris now, right? Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Shout out to Matt, he watches, right? No?
Yeah. I think he's still with him. I don't know. There was something on his Instagram. It looked like he was starting a new label. I don't know really what was. But either way, either way, we've had our differences in the past, and I wrote on his Instagram. I was like, listen, all I can tell you is in my history, in my experience, the first person that I saw repress rosin was him, and we had a white funky substance. I've done that. I never would create a product or release it, but it was always very interesting. We tested that chip before. I tested some recent Huckleberry OG that we did, and surprisingly, it was extremely high in THCA. It's like a white little chip, doesn't have a lot of flavor, and there is a website out there that teaches you how to do it. It is low.
We got NMR of it. It looks beautiful. It's the absolutely pristine.
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah.
I mean, the signals on the NMR ring like there's no tomorrow. It's just absolutely pristine, beautiful,
and it's solventless. So
yeah.
So if you go to lowtemp-plates.com, there's a whole tutorial on actually how to make it. And you could refine this 2 or 3 times. So if you press your rosin and repress it again at like 130 to 140, you'll get that nice white. If you could do it again, and you could start pulling out like all kinds of like crystalline from it. I have been doing that so you could do that for, you know, like a Pronoline or something like that for capsules, which works unbelievable. But now I've been soaking those in, you know, like how we do the crystalline for CBD and for the stuff that we're doing with Gold Drop, and now I've been doing that same thing with THC. So I'm going to have a Girl Scout cookies crystalline grown from soaking in terpenes instead of, you know, like people that are taking like an ethanol wash and then a hexane wash, like on a CBD, and then they're getting it to break out. I'm breaking it out with cannabis terpenes. So hopefully next week I'll have variations of a crystalline that I could test that will be grown from within that solventless. So I think it's pretty cool. It's a fast way to do that. I'm also working on ways to, if you do that with, say, CBD and THC oil, there's potential of separating the CBD out from the THCA. Because if you have any CBD that's in your oil, so if you notice when you make that THCA in those little chips that are left behind, all of the oil in the sauces to the other side, that will contain CBD and other components. So I think that it's a significant movement in the solventless world. And, you know, hats off to Matt. He was working on it for a while. I've seen a couple other people out there claiming that they created it, but
working on what? Like he pressed dry, he pressed it again, and inside the bag was THCA.
But we didn't know it at the time.
No, I know, because I mean, I did the same thing at the same time. I remember my dry sift turning white, being like, I got to puff this and see what's up, and feeling effects from it and being like, what the fuck?
I brought some to you. Recently. Remember, I was like, "Oh, check this out," and we smoked it together.
Yes,
that Matt gave me.
Yep.
And what I found, like, because I've seen him enter, and we've talked after cups and different things.
He has the patent.
Yeah, no, I think he actually filed for it or something. But he had, what I said he's been working on. I think legally he was working on patenting it, if I wasn't mistaken. But regardless. He had entered it a couple times. I'd only seen him. This is like for a year he's had it, and I felt bad because it's really strong, it's really good, and people weren't gravitating towards it at all. In the cups, it didn't do very good. People probably thought it wasn't real. Even when I got it, I was like, "Oh, this is solventless." And then I remembered, like, it just triggered my memory. I was like, "Oh, okay, I remember now." Because we thought it was lipids. We thought it was like fats or something.
That's what everyone was saying.
Oh yeah, it was like, oh, that stuff's garbage. I have since, though, so what's interesting, though, ever since I started Prana, when we press, like, you know, CBD or we press hash, we keep all those chips. And that goes into the topical line. I even told that to, I've even said that to Forrest when he came by, and he was like, "Oh," and I was like, "Yeah, everything gets reused." For us, you know, we put it under our high vacuum and into our prana fat, and then used and then heated it up to try to get like an active THC out of it. And there's quite a bit in those chips. With Talking Trees, we kind of joke about it with flower rosin and things and hash rosin. There's lots of edible makers that, you know, it's gold. It's considered like gold now, and people have been using that. So it's kind of funny that, like, at least for the solventless world, it's definitely the next push and the next movement that will come out more and more, and it's something that you could do with a hair iron and a 25 screen, you know.
Exactly. So, making your rosin and making another product simultaneously.
Yeah, and what's cool is the sauce. So, like, you know, for us, we walk into the walk-in freezer, and in like 30 seconds, you can take it right off. But you know, if you're at home and it's, you know, you've separated it, you're going to get like a super saucy thing on your parchment paper. So you can fold that up, put it in a double Ziploc, throw it in a freezer, you know, or vacuum seal it and throw it in a freezer. Try to get it as cold as possible. But the second you come out, if you're in an 85 degree or 90 degree area, it's just going to be all over the parchment again. So I think that's the only difficult part. But I do think that, you know, I do think it's going to push the push the industry yet again. I always like when people are doing things without solvents to see where it could go.
That would have been D420K's moment to say bong rip. I like that. It was like Tony was talking. I looked up. He just had a pipe in his mouth.
Well, I mean, you got to admit, it's pretty neat, huh, Mark? Because as a chemist, you do everything you can to try to find ways to separate. And people were laughing, and people have been laughing about rosin for a long time. I believe there's all kinds of memes out there that if you smoke rosin, you turn gay. Right? There's all kinds of funny little memes out there, but I don't know. It's getting pretty good.
Hey, Tony.
Yes, sir.
FYI, you can take the highly educated stems and put it on that Gen 1 cap of the...
Oh, yeah.
You get a little longer without burning yourself. Because those shorties can be a little woo-woo.
I've been looking for that thing for a while, bro. Every time someone says that, I'm like, yeah, where the hell is that thing? I actually lost my little titanium grade 260 wire screen with a hole in it.
It's the Gen 2 HE with it has the hollow and it has the 2 holes that allow you to breathe through it, and so it allows you to actually breathe through the cap, no problem.
Okay. So that's called the Gen 2.
Well, I think it is the second.
Oh yeah,
generation
look at you.
with the screws.
This thing screws off. You're right.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Little tricks I've learned.
Wow, that's so cool. Listen, dude, you still have to come by. I have your strawberry banana.
No problem. I'll come by early this week. My birthday's tomorrow, so it's been kind of a crazy week.
There we go.
Happy birthday, man.
Happy birthday.
Bong rip to that.
I'm taking one right now for that.
Well, I guess I might as well join you.
Happy birthday.
What are you, 40?
Yeah, I wish. 48.
You're 48. Come on. You don't look 48.
Thanks. I credit cannabis and not drinking.
You don't have a single wrinkle on you.
Look closer. I got lucky. You know, hey, it's just I blame the genes.
Yeah. People say that to me, and you know what I say? I'm like, well, I don't have any, I got the good genes from the cannabis or whatever from smoking, but, good complexion here, but we both have the same situation up here. So,
well, I would have hair. I just would have it around a band, and it's just how my family is. And I'm like, fuck that, just shave it. I don't want to look like some crazy nutty professor. I'm not Rick from Rick and Morty. What up? Wubba dub dub.
Right.
Wubba dubba dub dub.
Yeah. But if we were testing, so Mark, we were testing the strawberry banana goose, testing 84 and 85%. It's over 80 on the THCA, and that I have 100 grams that of this hash rosin from strawberry banana goo that I'm going to press just to make the THCA, just to like have that, and then I'm going to re-soak it back in terpenes, try to grow that out, and then add the sauce back to it, see if I can make something crazy.
Nice.
Something for Bubble Man.
Little crazy something.
Something.
Some Frankenhash.
Yeah. But there was a lot of questions about, like I got this week, I guess those Trinity pens went out. And I did want to say that they're working on a way to get terpenes back out to you guys on a retail level, but we'll find out on Monday. It looks like maybe not through Blue River, but through Uptech, you'll be able to get those kits, and you'll be able to get terpenes as well from him because, you know, he has a long history with his credit card processors, and we went through the qualification process, and it seems like they were pretty accepting of it. So it'll be pretty good to get those out. And I sent you the new vials too. You saw those, huh, Mark?
I did, yeah. They look pretty cool. I'm always down with new vials.
We show. See
new
if I can.
Containers.
Well, I think it's important because look, I've gone through this thing, these little applicators, and this is why I haven't released stuff, because I wanted to take time with it. And these little applicators, you could see this had to be changed, right? And so you could either do an HD or LD or a PTFE type of plastic.
Straight glass works too. That's what I used.
Straight glass works really well.
Just straight glass.
Yep. Those I would say, you know, Gary's working on trying to get those. But yeah, he's got one too over there. So see the one that Mark's got? All right. So that rubber so that little rubber stopper, anything past, you know, 8% terpenes is going to start to 8 to 10% terpenes is going to start to eat that away long term. When you start getting 15% terpenes, and I'm just sharing with it, like this little plunger wants to punch out, whether the terpenes are off gassing or whatever you want to call it, it definitely creates a little bit of pressure in there from high volume of terpenes. That's about 70% THCA and 15%, 12% terpenes. And so they're okay. They work all right. But I think that at the end of the day, I have a different method that I think, you know, will eventually, we're going to have to build our own, to be honest with you, from scratch. But in the meantime, we've got a different way that I'm going to do it with a micro glass dropper and a vial within a vial that I think is pretty neat, and it has a PTFE cap. But the way that the vial will work, I'll show you right now. Mark will recognize these. Boom. So that little vial is on a kind of like almost like a spring loaded into the cap. When you open it, you could actually have your terpenes in there with a little glass dropper or a glass syringe. Then you could turn that inside to the vial, mix all of your stuff up. You could put 2 grams in there, which makes 4 refill carts. So this is for the people at home that are buying Trinities that want to like make their own stuff at home. You need terpenes to do that, and you need to be able to get it so that you can get every last drop out of it. Instead of it being a square bottom, it needs to be a pointed bottom. You need to be able to get something in there. So this is the solution for that. And then, you know, pre-mixed refills. I find this thing to be easy to use. I know Mark does. I mean, they're awesome because you could do anything with them. You know, I find it easy to fill the tank up like that, but you know, a little glass dropper that will go into there and to put it in the side of the tank would work as well. It's just that saucy, you know, it's not like a distillate, so it doesn't necessarily have to be in something like this, but.
Yeah, do you see it turning dark on exposure to light? Like when it first goes in there, it's kind of like a lighter
creamy.
Yellow, but
yeah, it's creamy. Yep, it was lighter. It was creamier.
Yeah.
Yep.
I could see the oil turning dark, you know, in those clear glasses. Or the
terpenes will also, besides melting the rubber stopper and the syringe, will melt any plastic sidewalls also.
Yeah. Yep.
It doesn't necessarily melt it, right? It basically just plasticizes it. So that's probably
it melts it. I first saw this 40 years ago in a vacuum sealed glass mason jar with a rubber band I accidentally left in it. I opened it up 6 months later, and the rubber band had melted all in the bud.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, I can.
I'll see if I can get a picture. I can send it from my phone. But I had a spray bottle that actually House of Harlequin gave me, Wade's organization, that was full of terpenes, but it was kind of in a spritzer. So I was going to take it home and work with it, and it tipped over in my refrigerator, and I found it, like I noticed a day or so later, and it had melted the plastic shelf on my refrigerator and fused the container to it. So in the cold refrigerator, it was corrosive enough to melt the shelf, and I have a picture of it here on my phone. I'll see if I can get it to pull up, but that was a lesson learned the hard way about not only how corrosive they can be, but
well, check this out. I just posted this in the chat. You can post it in the hash group on Facebook. But if you click that little image I sent you guys in this little chat, you could share that. This has a chart of the LDPE, HDPE, PTFE, PSPP, PC, and ABS types of things that are out there, and then it has all of the different solvents, and then it gives you a rating of if it's going to be good or not for that. And so, caustic effects and things like this, ether, ester, it's got all kinds of nasty, great stuff in there. And you want to look for things like, if you look at the PTFE, it's all A's all the way down except for one category, benzenine. And then you could see what would be rated. So if you're doing something with a hash oil and you're saying, okay, they're just using PP at the stopper, and you look at terpenes and you say, okay, terpenes, with what we know about them, once you start going past, 8%, 10%, 20%, that stuff, you're going to have to use different sources. And PTFE, like we talked about, not something easily biodegradable, but it does work really good. All of the new Blue River
custom, not biodegradable at all, man.
No, yeah, it's not biodegradable. And so, but it is the best, if you're looking at the best source, for not having any caustic
for solvent resistance. Yeah, and so again, like, part of the issue with some of these things is a plastic is not just the polymer itself, and people are talking about, like, whether it's polypropylene, polystyrene, there's polyolefin plastics, there's polyester plastics, but what makes them flexible is they add plasticizers to that. And a common plasticizer are the phthalates that are used, that they often have health concerns about because they're in plastics, like for baby bottles and baby toys and whatnot, and they can leach out, and I guess in certain doses, phthalate plasticizers can be toxic. But like, that's the issue with a lot of these materials, whether it's the lid on your vials or whatever that comes in contact with extracts that are rich with terpenes, is that the terpenes will start to leach out the plasticizer, and now you have plasticizer in your hash, phthalates and shit like that. So that's why you never want to use any plastic containers to have anything. And we used to always use film vials for like buds and stuff, but I mean, like, for vials for storing stuff like this, it should be in a glass vial, not a plastic vial, and you shouldn't really be using plastic syringes. And I see plastic syringes used quite a bit. But I think the other thing, and again, Tony, this might have something to do with what, like with these syringes right here, they are stabilized to take some type of liquid load, and in most cases, like, there are no, if you look at like the rubbers and all those rubbers again will all start absorbing. It's just a matter of rate. And certainly, like, if you pull the plug off of some of these syringes, you'll find that the rubber itself has swollen. I mean, there's like, now the polymer itself is now swollen because you've actually absorbed a lot of the liquid into the material itself, so you can't kind of fit it in anymore. But the point is that any material that you come in contact with that's a synthetic material, like a polymer or a plastic, a lot of those are coated or have plasticizers in there that could essentially leach out with terpenes. So I think that's the more problematic issue of using anything that comes in contact with a extract or concentrate that could extract plasticizer.
Yeah, I agree. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we have only so many choices. Even the lids, we've got new little lids for these terpenes, and they do sell PTFE underside. Yep, PTFE slip lids. Then they sell plastic ones, and they sell different shit that's under there. But ultimately, if you want to have the safest vials for terpenes or the safest vials for high terpene oils, kind of have to go that direction. So that's what we're kind of re-releasing, and then I think that's how our applicators are going to be. I mean, I think that like if you're using something like that, I don't think if it's a short-term thing, it's pretty good, but the whole concept has to be redesigned. So we'll eventually have our own little custom push twist glass on glass, refill applicator that can work like a syringe but not look like one, but also work like a controlled device. I've seen it.
You can see what happens when you have like a paper liner and it's not a plastic liner.
Oh yeah, that's horrible.
Now the paper starts to become basically a reservoir for anything that's inside the jar. But so you can't there's not a paper solution. And I think there are like coatings that you can put on that are somewhat more biodegradable than PTFE.
Yeah. This one is all of our new caps are they don't have that kind of liner like in something.
Tony, let's see that again. Hold that up again.
Yeah, I'll show you. It looks like that.
So it's a maybe like a polyethylene liner.
It's a yeah, I forget what it was. It was slightly rated. So I thought it was pretty good instead of like a. I have to look it up when we bought them. It was definitely better than the liner, but nothing that's like anything that's saucy. It's like here's one that I'm not using anymore. This one's okay. This is one of those. This is what you normally see. That little shit that's around there.
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want a whole container made out of that material, but certainly as a lid liner, that would be just fine, probably.
Yeah.
I would imagine.
Yeah, I don't know about the silicone containers though. Those little weird rubber ones. Those seem to crack and break down.
Well, they're a victim. Sometimes you get like these little tiny holes, and the little pore holes. It's not like the material itself is impervious to most, but because it's thermally cured at a higher temperature, where again polymerizations happened, and so there's a barrier to keep things from being absorbed. But they're only as good a barrier as they are free of little pinholes or cracks or fissures, and that's where stuff can start getting in. And so yeah.
How do you feel about LDPE and HDPE?
Yeah, so those are just acronyms for low density polyethylene and high density polyethylene. They're made from petroleum. I don't know. Do we want to promote petroleum products on this show? I don't know. They're plastics. They're ubiquitous. They're in society. I mean, there's not much you can do, about it. They're everywhere.
They're everywhere, dude.
I guess you have to do your limit to, make sure that any product packaging that you buy.
Well, I'm saying, don't you think that's better than PP?
Polypropylene?
Yeah, don't you think an LD or an HD would be a better, as far as they'll give you a little bit more protection if you're talking about more, high terpene?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, again, I think that those types of high terpene products should only be packaged in glass.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, occasionally we get a fold that's some kind of, hash, and it's very, very terpy, and within a fold, sometimes difficult to deal with, and you wish you had it in a glass container. But I would think that, yeah, less plastic is good when it comes to anything that comes in contact with something, especially something that you plan on dabbing or vaping.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in really quick and show you guys a new package product that we're having here. You know, we've got our CO2 extract that's in between 10 and 26% terpene content, and so it's really, really high. And I've been worried about putting it in any sort of plastic syringes. You know, always going for the best that we can get, but plastic was really the best at the moment. So after working and looking in China, I found these, and so it's all glass on glass, and it's very similar to what you've got there, Tony, that you've been using, although there's no silicone plunger, and so they hold air. You know, you can pull it up, and then it's definitely an airtight fit there. So if anybody's looking for something to put their extract in that's a high terpene extract, definitely look around. Alibaba is a good resource for this. And
hey, let me ask you something. Does that plunger, since if you get to 20 or 30% with terpenes, does that plunger stay in on its own, or do you have to hold it in?
Yeah, no, it holds in. It holds in. So I'm just, you know,
yeah,
just sticking my finger over it there, you can tell that it's airtight.
Yeah.
It just bounces right back up. So yeah, it's glass on glass. I would say that if you get over 20 or 30% terpenes, you're going to be losing it. Like if you put pure terpenes in here, they're going to come out the backside.
Oh,
It's not going to hold in that really, really liquid terpene. But yeah, for anything that's a mixture, and you know, we haven't had any issues with it on the high terpene extracts.
Yeah, it's important to talk about, because as everyone keeps boosting their terpene level, it's like, gotta change that packaging. And that's why I didn't release these little. I made like 6 of these applicators. I've kind of sat on them. I've changed the plungers, the LD. You know, I've just done a few different things. I'm like, yeah, and it's like you could go down that path. But then ultimately, I'm just doing a little glass-on-glass spring-loaded vial with a glass-on-glass micro dropper for at least for the tanks, because I'm not trying. I'm not trying to get like. I'm not trying to use it for dabbing. I'm just trying to refill my friggin' a tank. You know, it's like just like, how do I get my sauce in something where I don't lose it? You know, I've got this beautiful like live rosin sauce and cream, and you're like, okay, what do I put it in? I can't put it in a regular vial because you won't get it all out. You can't put it in stuff that's going to have any plastics, because then that'll eat away. So the same thing you probably went through. You're like, okay, what do we do? And you're like, I got to find something. And then, you know, the glass syringes I think are great. You know, it's just like some of the dispensaries and some of the people are like, oh, it's a syringe. It's like, yeah, but like there's only so many glass on glass things that you can use. You're either going to use a dropper in a glass, some form of vial, or you're going to have to use a glass on glass syringe. The one Marcus has, and we found the same thing. And you know, Alibaba's got really thin. They have really thin ones too that are just exactly what you were showing. You had a Big Daddy one though. You know, yours is huge.
This is a 2 milliliter syringe,
yeah,
and they do sell the 1 milliliters that are just like the standard 1 mil syringe.
Yeah, I think Marcus has one up. Yep, those are the 1 mLs.
Yep, exactly.
There you go. Yep,
exactly. I really liked the form factor of the 2 mil because you were able to, you know, pull your gram of extract out, and you don't have a whole bunch of space in there taking up extra packaging space. So the 2 milliliter seemed to have worked really well.
Yeah.
I went in the other door for using this. I actually poured my sauce right in the back, let it drip right down, and then just dropped the plunger in and filled from there. I didn't actually pull the sauce up.
And it's actually, yeah, it's actually really hard to pull up on these syringes.
I believe it.
So a better way to go about it is to fill a much larger syringe and then use a syringe to syringe connector, and then you can actually fill from the bottom up, and it'll just push the plunger up to 1 milliliter.
I like that.
Well, that's so then to do that, but then like for the, you know, the common folk, like, you know, the best for what we went with is the V insert inside the vial that has the sauce that you can just grab it with a micro dropper to fill up your tank. Because then it's like more little parts, you know. I was like going through this a lot. But, you know, if you're trying to use it for an applicator, yeah, the glass on glass is the way to go.
Yeah, good to see you, Jeff. By the way, long time no see, bro.
Yeah, good to see you guys.
Yeah, I like how he was gone for like 8 months, and then he just pops right in. He's just like right into it, like as if he was just like there the whole time.
Yeah, I got a question real quick. That's great to see you, man.
Yeah.
That's fucking awesome. I left the room. I came back. I could hear his voice. I was like, oh, sounds like Mr. Church is in the room.
Well, thanks for continuing to extend the invite. I have family, and so Sundays is a sacred day for the family. So it just happens to be that I had a little bit of time today. So
it's a church kind of day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Church
That's awesome.
on church. Yeah. So how the hell have you been? You're doing CO2, like you're doing a high terpene CO2.
Yeah. So we've been doing some really high terpene CO2. Raw CO2, so there's no winterization that's involved in the process. Using really high quality material, you don't have all of the lipids that are extracted. I mean, there's still lipids, don't get me wrong, but it's really, you know, a high terpene content, just really liquid extract that we're able to put right into a vape cart and go with it. So you know, really been blessed with the ability to work with Puffin Farm up here in Washington State in the legal market, and you know, just been enjoying all the clean green certified material that they're able to provide.
So your process is solventless then, because you're not winterizing.
No, well, it's a solvent because CO2 is a solvent. A lot of people say, you know, CO2 is non-solvent because it's a totally different class. But yeah, it's definitely solvent extraction using a you know, Eden Labs extractor is what I'm using.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But you don't. I mean, using CO2, you don't test positive for residuals on anything, do you?
Well, I'm not putting any solvents in there, and CO2 off gases as soon as it gets back to the you know, regular atmosphere. So there's no CO2 residual in there. You know, at least not after 24 hours. Everything has off gassed out of there. But yeah, no secondary solvents at all. So
yeah, so that's what I always try to tell people when. So there's that fine line when someone's like, "Oh, it's a CO2 extractors, it's solventless," and like, well, it'd only be solventless, and then I can you know, we can argue the definition of the solvent, but in the end here, ultimately, what we're putting in our lungs doesn't contain any footprint from a solvent if you're not winterizing with alcohol. Where a lot of CO2 companies winterize with alcohol, grain alcohol, then they have to put it in a rotovap, and they have to distill it out, and there's always like that some small percentage of alcohol. So in my mind, what you're doing, you know, is a very clean version of the CO2 because it's
solvent free. I would say that because there's no residual solvents left in the extract afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a gas that's turned into a liquid, then back into a gas.
It's the extraction is actually done in a supercritical pressure.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I'm down with that.
What's the cannabinoid concentration in your extract?
It varies between the high 40s and the low 60s.
So it's suffice to say there is a fair amount of lipids in there.
Well, yeah, there's also a large amount of other constituents as well, like terpenes. Like we've gotten up to 26%, so that's taking a huge bite out of what, you know, out of that.
Yeah, that would be an 86% oil if you test 60 and 20.
Exactly, and then there's the flavonoids, the other constituents that are extractable under CO2 supercritical. So,
very neat.
unfortunately we're not testing for at the moment. I wish that I could get an NMR done on all of my extracts so that I could really know what was in there, but unfortunately it's just not viable at the moment in our industry.
I would love to send you a blank kit for you to try the reusable Trinity tanks, because I think you would like them.
Oh yeah.
Specifically with the oil that you just described. If you put your address in the little chat, not in the YouTube one, send me it there. I'll send you one.
I'll text it over to you. I got your number as long as it hasn't changed.
Yeah, text me over, because I'd just be curious to see what your high terpene CO2 raw would be like in one of these.
Yeah,
I've been putting all kinds of different oil in it. You know, everybody's oil, just to see.
Yeah, I bet it would be spectacular.
Oh my God. I tried some, there was some holy water, like the newer version, obviously, like the solvent-free holy water. Then I had some distillate, some gold drop distillate and terps. It's pretty good. I find that like it's better suited for a little bit thicker oil, you know. It's better suited for what you're talking about. Like it's good for rosin, hash rosin with terpenes. It's good for like an oil that's a little bit thicker. It works fine with the thinner ones, but I think you would find that without
this CO2 it has like a thickness that happens when it kind of coagulates and sits there, but the moment that you move it in the vial or in, you know, it just turns right to a liquid without even any heat, so you can literally drip it out of the syringes, which is
that's kind of like what I noticed with yeah, exactly the same thing. So like this is a once you hit like 15%. I mean, if I took this off, I'll show you. Same thing. It just drips out. I mean, it literally just like drips.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. That's the same viscosity as what we're dealing with up here for sure.
The tank, you're gonna love the tank then, because that's what it's designed for.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to try it out, and I'll let you know how it works out.
Yeah. I'm getting ready to put a whole bunch of them in wash them in ISO. I'm going to try that dark thing you said, Marcus. The I'm going to try one of the tanks in the dark clear.
In the DC.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, of course. I'm about to clean some in the near future here as well. My two are just done, so I will be cleaning some and hopefully making a video. I am at the 3-hour point. I promised my family I would go hang out with my little guy. It's his birthday, number 3. Number 3 birthday. So I would like to say thank you to everyone for showing up, from Forrest to Etienne to Skunkman Sam to Wade to Jeff Church to the Dragonfly Medicine crew to Mark Cialdone. to Tony and D420K who came and left, and everyone watching. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your time with us. We'll be back next week, and yeah, 3 episodes left till 156, our 3-year anniversary. So thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.
Here we're live now. Well, not live, but I turned on the camera, and anything you say can and will be used. I mean,
radio.
All right, hey guys, welcome to Bubbleman's World. We're freshly done with Hash Church. I'm here with Matt from Sasquatch Rosin Press Company, and yeah, we got the M1 here, and we're about to rip up. Actually, Flav's in the house too. You want to bring some of that hash over? Flav 421 is in the house. I haven't seen this guy in ages. It's actually kind of ridiculous. It's been so long. Okay, brother.
Good to see you.
Yes, man. Yes, man. So, he's brought us some lovely hash here. I think this sweet skunk has the smell that I'm interested in acquiring.
Oh, shit.
Check that out.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a nice color.
So we need to get it into a screen.
Should be very terpy.
Oh shit. I guess I better show them because they'll kind of be like, well, what does it look like, dude? Like, is it nice?
What color is it?
Can't just take a word.
No, nobody's taking my word for anything these days.
No one believes me.
Oh my god, look at how close it's getting.
Hell yeah.
The smell is so good. It's got that sweet skunky. Got a little tool. Some sort of little. Don't want to stick my finger in your cookie jar.
Alright.
Let's hit this one first though.
Yeah, do we have a tool to scrape?
Card maybe?
Oh.
A business card? I just
That'll
put 2 on the shelf in there on the left with the water bottles. There's 2.
Just break it up.
Yeah, break it up exactly. But we might also need a business card to get it into.
Oh, I was using those little golden bags that were sitting right there. Yeah, that'll work.
That was like a business card.
Yeah, I don't have
There's 2 of them inside on the left on the shelf. 2 business cards. It's a TELUS business card that was right in the corner here.
Oh, check
I
it
put
out.
it in the yeah, there we go.
Sasquatch business card.
There we go.
The round corners are the best.
Should we weigh this and
They
find out
fall
what
out
we're
of the
dealing
pile
with?
every time.
Do you want to tear the bag real quick before?
Yeah, we should be looking at like 0.7.
Yeah.
Between like 0.72 to 0.74 is like pretty accurate. 0.74.
And smell it again.
0.73. Look at that, dude.
Smell that.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna do a sweet skunk press. And then we've got a whole schwack of other things to press. I'm gonna come in nice and close with the camera when we press it. I'll move the camera real close up and we can get it on those plates. So
I'm not sure we're gonna get all of that in
No?
one little bag. I guess we can. It's gonna melt super fast.
I think so.
And we gotta fucking turn the plates down.
Is you got to remember that the metabolites are stored in fatty tissues, in fatty organs, and so it's protected